My name is Wim Decorte. I work at Alliance. I lead their FileMaker practice. I think that's about it. We've got about 30 full-time FileMaker developers, so it's a great place to be, and I enjoy mentoring them all and bugging them with my dogmas and all of that good stuff. The presentation today will be a bit of an hopscotch step. We'll jump from thing to thing. There is a common thread to most of it, and it has to do with FileMaker Server, no surprise. So we will talk about Linux. We'll talk about performance. We will talk about some of the new options that have been introduced with 19.1. We'll talk about release cycles in general as well. What I'll start the presentation with is an overview of where we are actually with external authentication and including OAuth. And I know that I've been talking about this together with Stephen Blackwell, who's on today as well, a lot in the last 12 months. Mainly because I think, and Stephen thinks too, and judging by the number of downloads we get, it is an important topic. So Stephen and I were preparing for one of the Claris Engage on-demand sessions, and as we were putting it together, I realized that like the schematic that I have put in place of where we've come from and where we are right now is probably the best one that I've done ever. So I wanted to share that with you. You'll obviously, if you watch the Claris Engage video by now, you'll have seen the same thing. But I'll hear. Say that again. Say that again. All right.
If besides Wim could mute yourself, please. I've been going through muting people, but just make sure you're muted. We're getting a little feedback.
All right, so we've always had this in FileMaker, right? The ability to just log in with a username and a password. So there's really nothing too special about that. I want to frame what that is in slightly different terms than we traditionally come across. Because we are talking about modern authentication and having fewer identity stores, which is something that has come up for a lot of clients these days for two important aspects. One is the big fancy word of digital transformation, which is really nothing more than the ability to orchestrate using a bunch of different services that each solve a problem and having your data flow through all of those. To make that happen efficiently, you don't want to maintain an identity for your users in every single one of those services, right? You want to go ideally with a unified identity, only one identity store, only one place that gets to authenticate your users. So that's sort of like the backdrop for this. So if we think back to what we typically do when we set up a FileMaker file, we create a user account and a password. What we're doing there is we're making the FileMaker file the identity store for that user. Right, so that file is the identity store. So thinking about that in these terms, and obviously that only goes for individual users. For every user that you want to let into your solution, you have to create an individual account in there. Now, back in 2004 with FileMaker 7, we were given the ability to use external data stores. External identity stores, not data stores. Right, so the two big ones were Active Directory from Microsoft and Apple's Open Directory. And there's a third one that is very often overlooked, but very powerful, is the ability to create those accounts and groups of users on the operating system of your FileMaker Server machine. So if you can't use AD or OD, you could always use that. But more importantly than just having those, it allowed us to migrate away from having those individual users set up in the FileMaker file to being able to do group-based authentication, right? Inside the FileMaker file, the only thing you need to create is a group name, and every user who belongs to that group in that external identity store will get access to your file with the privilege set that you have attached to that group name. So we've had this for the past 15 years, so that's been great. What it allowed us to do is basically that login dialog. So like, instead of just being able to input the username and password of whatever we set up in the FileMaker file, you can use these identity providers. And then back in 2017, maybe, whenever FileMaker 16 came out, we were given 3 new additional identity providers. And those typically show up when you configure them in FileMaker Server at the bottom of the login dialog. So we have Amazon, Google, and Microsoft accounts. And if we think of it again in terms of group-based authentication, which is really where you want to be, right? If you don't want to store and do the account management in the FileMaker file, you want to do it in a place that allows you to pass the group names back to FileMaker, so that in FileMaker you have the minimum amount of setup to do, and with setup also maintenance and all of these things, right? So the login dialog really looks like this. And of those 3 new ones, only the Microsoft Azure AD was, of those OAuth providers, was the one that lets us do group-based authentication. So that's the most powerful one. That's the one that I typically would seek out and see if we can make that work. So we have a nice mix of ways to keep and store and manage the user's identity. About a year and a bit ago, year and a half ago, I would say now, we started to dig a little deeper into what is it that makes those OAuth providers work. So those 3 new ones that we were given, and we found out that they work because FileMaker Server can participate in an OpenID Connect authentication flow. And OpenID is, you see it there, it's based on the OAuth standard. So it's an industry standard. It's not something that FileMaker does wonkily or anything like that. FileMaker is a really nice citizen in this space. So OpenID Connect. So the next obvious step is, what if we look at the quadrants, the Forrester or the Gartners or anything like that, because that's what our clients are asking for, right? So clients are asking, we have this infrastructure where we use Ping or Okta as our identity provider, and we have this FileMaker solution here. Can FileMaker play, and can we authenticate users into the FileMaker solutions using those identity providers? So that's why we care. So when we look at that login dialog, really, and we abstract out, we take one step above that Google, Amazon, Azure AD thing, we know that FileMaker Server plays with OpenID Connect or works through OpenID Connect. So what it means is that all of these things that we've had for a long time that can let us authenticate users, it really looks more like this these days, right? Because pretty much every single identity provider that is worth its salt allows OpenID Connect as one of the flows to authenticate users to, right? So all the ones that I have listed there on the slide, these are not just the ones that I think should work, right? So these are all ones that we have already used with clients. And pretty much all of them allow for group-based authentication. Not all of them. We have sign-in with Apple there on the lower right corner. That one, there's no notion of or concept of groups with Apple IDs, right? So it's an individual user, but all of those work. So I think if you want to remember, burn it on your retinas, this is so like the thing to remember, right? So there's no end to identity providers that you can use with FileMaker Server. As long as they support the OpenID flow, OpenID Connect flow, you're good to go. And of course, we were talking about on-premise FileMaker servers, right? So if you have your file hosted on FileMaker Cloud, you can still use a few of those, but you're not as free as you are with the on-premise version of FileMaker Server to basically pick any one that you want and then just configure it in FileMaker Server. Because FileMaker Cloud is a more closed environment, you only get the ones that Claris themselves support for their FileMaker Cloud product, right? So it's still a good subset. So we have Azure AD, we have ADFS and Okta, and of course Claris ID, which runs off AWS Cognito, is its own external identity store, right? So you still don't create the users inside your FileMaker file. So we have 4 different types of FileMaker Server these days, right? So we have our 3 on-premise versions, Mac, Windows, and Linux, and then we have the FileMaker Cloud as the 4th one. And they each have very subtle differences in the functionality that they support in general, but when it comes to authentication as well. So it does pay attention a little bit as to what features you're after, or what features your client may want when it comes to authentication down the road, and then pick your FileMaker Server deployment and version accordingly. All of those external identity providers that I had on that big slide there, the Oktas, the Pings, the Auth0s, OneLogins, all of those actually work with your on-premise FileMaker versions since FileMaker Server 17, right? we had some working with 16 as well, but 17 is the first version of FileMaker Server that really embraced this and did this well. So this is not a new feature. This is not a FileMaker 19 or 19.1 feature. This actually works already with every version of FileMaker Server since 17. So even if you have clients that are working with slightly older versions of FileMaker Server, these things are still open to you. You can still use them. In the presentation, we go on to do an actual demo of using a YubiKey to do a completely passwordless authentication into a FileMaker file using a YubiKey, because that's the beauty of those identity providers, right? It's not just about the simple act of authenticating the user. That is obviously really important, but it's all the things that they allow you to do: multi-factor authentication natively, things like passwordless authentication, which is where a lot of this authentication goes. They have great reporting, proactive threat analysis, all of these things, all the things that you would want to have for your solution are made available to you through the use of these identity providers. And just to bring it all back to FileMaker, inside your FileMaker solution, when we talk about group-based authentication, this is what it looks like, right? Whether we use the old style Active Directory or Open Directory or the new ones, it really comes down to just creating the groups that your users belong to inside your FileMaker file. And that's all you need to do. Obviously, you tie them to a privilege set that dictates what they are allowed to do, but that's as simple as it looks like. And when you authenticate a user into the solution, FileMaker knows a lot of details about that user, right? It's not just the group that they belong to. Obviously, that is part of what is returned, but you get the privilege set name. You can do that with anything, but you can get the actual username. And typically, it's an email address when people authenticate through the external identity providers. Doesn't have to be, but that's sort of like a typical way to authenticate. You get the username, the group that the user belongs to, the privilege set that you assign to them. So there's a lot of information that you get back from the user, even though that user doesn't exist in the FileMaker accounts, right? So that's sometimes the missing link that people think, well, that's all good and dandy, but I won't know who the user is, right? Individually, I won't know who they are, but you will. It's all right there. And the other thing that is important about these identity providers that they can bring is, I mentioned FileMaker plays through OpenID Connect, which is a subset or a layer on top of OAuth 2. But what if you have a client that says, no, you know what, you have to connect to my OpenLDAP or any other LDAP compliant directory service, or we only speak SAML, right? So we don't do this newfangled OAuth stuff. We're stuck with the old SAML stuff. If you use an identity provider, and pretty much all of them, right, to a fault, you can obviously use them, and that's where your users are stored, but they can also delegate and federate the actual authentication to something else. And a lot of big companies use something like Okta or Ping, but they really keep their users in Active Directory. It's just that Ping, Okta, Auth0, OneLogin is sort of like the go-between to get the authentication done. So you can do the same thing with anything that your chosen identity provider supports as either broker or federation, right? So you see the list there. The screenshot is from Keycloak, which is a free open source Red Hat project, which is a full-blown identity provider. You install it yourself. So it doesn't have to be a service that you subscribe to. If you don't want to, you can really run this on your own. And you can see in the list there, that one can be the go-to between a SAML provider. Or God forbid, if you really want to let people log into your FileMaker solution with their Facebook account, you can do that too, right? So that authentication can be delegated and federated to any of those what they call social identity providers as well. So you see the list there. And that's about it that I wanted to share about that modern authentication. I was very happy with the way that it came out. As sort of like a summary of where we have been, the process evolution through the FileMaker features to where we are now. If I want you to remember anything from the last however long minutes, that 15 minutes I've been talking, it's really that all of these identity providers are open to be used from your FileMaker. We've had great success with clients. It's been for a couple of really big customers, it has been the thing that allowed them to adopt FileMaker, or it's the thing that has kept FileMaker in play in their organization. It's that important. And also with the pandemic, where users are in different places, we see a lot of customers, big and small. It's not only the big ones, but big and small, figuring out how to effectively solve the authentication issue, right? Because they cannot rely on the users being on premise inside their office building where their Active Directory server is. Now the users are anywhere on the internet, and authentication and the protection of the user's identity becomes a really, really big issue. And so the thing to remember there is FileMaker plays extremely well there, and everything has already been done. So feel free to reach out with any questions and anything that you may have there. All right, any questions on that?
Yeah, hey Wim, do you want to take questions on each sort of area as you go through it, or wait till the end? What's your preference?
I think it makes sense to do them like at the end of every big section.
Okay, so if anyone has questions specifically related to the authentication topics, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in.
My question is with cost. It's always a budgetary consideration. What is, for larger companies, I'm sure that that's not an issue because they're already using something for other services. But for smaller companies, budgetary is always, what's the price range per user per month for all these services for?
Yep, it varies a lot, right? If we look at some of the big ones, and obviously if you're looking for something free, it's there, right? So that Keycloak thing, it's open source, so you install it anywhere. There are some services that provide it for you, where you basically pay the cost of having the Linux server running. Providers like Auth0, which is one of the big players in this realm, has an excellent free tier where you get thousands of logins per month for free. And then if you exceed that, there's a tiered pricing. So you can get, if you don't want to bother with installing and maintaining your own, like with Keycloak, you can still get one of those commercial services that still do it for free for those bigger, for those smaller deployments. Another big one to think about is that your users may, or your client may already have an identity provider in the form of Azure AD. Because if they use Office 365 or Microsoft 365 for their email, chances are that they already have Azure AD. So it's just a matter of going there and configuring it, and you can use that same email account to log into your FileMaker solution. So while that's not free, it may already be paid for. If you go to something like Ping or Okta, which typically you wouldn't do as a smaller organization, unless it really fits into their IT strategy and they've already decided to go there. But if you go to one of those big ones that is not tied there, you can pay up to anywhere from a couple of dollars per user per month to as high as $20 per user per month, depending on how many features you unlock, like the ability to use personal identity cards, right? Or how much of their preventative services you subscribe to, right? So it can be anywhere. But if you're looking for something cheap or free, there's some really good choices.
So I have a question with Keycloak. Do you just download it and install it on your own Linux server and then it runs from there?
Absolutely.
Does it have to have an SSL certificate on it?
Yes.
Okay.
For the simple reason that we're talking about passing along authentication information, right? So
no, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not something you want to do unencrypted.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Hey, Wim.
Yep.
You mentioned earlier, just sort of in passing, you'll still know who your users are, even if you're not using internal FileMaker authentication. Can you talk real briefly about how that works?
I can. Huh. How about that? All right. So that's the screenshot that I had there in the slide. So you don't really have individual user. So the user really isn't identified at this level, right? Only the group that they belong to. But using the FileMaker get functions, actually I probably have them in the scripts. Right? So the get functions are the ones that will let you know the get account name is going to be whatever the user authenticated with at the identity provider side, right?
Oh.
That is part of the information that flows back to FileMaker. So the privilege set name, that's fine, but the account group name as well, that is the group that in essence, it's worked that way since FileMaker 7. When you authenticate somewhere else, part of the information that you get back from that identity provider is who is the user, and in this case, it's the email address, but it could be their AD name, right? So you get the name, the unique name of the user. You also get a list of groups that this user belongs to. That is part of what the identity providers give you back. So FileMaker knows that, FileMaker understands that, and FileMaker exposes that to you through these get functions. So if you use get account group name, you'll get the group name that FileMaker, when FileMaker went through the list of groups provided by the identity provider, it picks one, the one that matches the name of the group that you have in your FileMaker file, and that returns that through the get functions.
So all the same native functions still call and return. Just they're smart enough to know to go somewhere else to get the answer.
Well, yeah. By the time that the get functions get invoked, FileMaker, the FileMaker session has already received that data. What really happens under the hood is that when you click that button on the login dialog, right? So you get taken to the identity provider's website. So you're not in FileMaker. You do your thing. When the identity provider says, "Yep, you are authenticated," even when you're not authenticated, it basically compiles what is called a JWT, a JSON web token, which is encrypted and all of that stuff. But inside, it's really a piece of JSON that has some piece of information that FileMaker then parses and makes available to you through those get functions. So that's how the data gets there.
That's great. Thank you, Wim.
My pleasure.
And Wim, perhaps mentioning authentication order, just because that's something that people sometimes get tripped up on with, if people are part of multiple groups.
Yes, indeed. Let's see. I don't have it. I don't have this one here. But yes, if a user belongs to multiple groups, right? So part of the information that you get, that FileMaker gets back from the identity provider, is a list of groups that the user belongs to, right? So if that user belongs to multiple groups on, say, to make it easier on the Active Directory side, FileMaker has to pick one of those, right? Because you only have one role. And managers and users is a good example, right? Because typically you have one big group for all your users, and then you have a subgroup that just has your managers. But the managers typically also belong to the users group. So by virtue of having managers before users, anyone who belongs to the managers group will get assigned the privilege set attached to the managers group and not the one to the users group. So if you were to flip that around, and you can see the priority order here, right? So FileMaker will go down this list in the priority order that is set here, which is called there the authentication order. So you can get tripped up if the user gets what you think is the wrong privilege set. It's more often than not, it's because you have things in a different order here in the authentication order.
Thanks. Any other questions on authentication before we move on to the next topic? Doesn't sound like it, so go ahead, Wim.
All right. I may have talked about the Punisher in one of my previous presentations. As we know, FileMaker 19.1 is a big release when it comes to FileMaker Server, because it has very dramatic performance improvements, pretty much on par with what was promised originally with FileMaker 18, FileMaker Server 18, which didn't turn out all that well, and then got disabled in 19.0 and was actually removed in 19.1. So the changes that were made in 19.1 are basically a collection of different features. And there's a couple of big ones and there's a couple of smaller ones. The big one has to do with fines. And as we were going through ETS, And this is something that obviously, if you're ever participating in ETS or even just wondered what a different server would mean performance-wise for you, or whether going from 18 to 19 server really makes an impact on performance. Obviously, we were asking ourselves the same questions, and I personally live and breathe FileMaker Server all day, every day. So it's a big question, right? Because people and my clients come to me and say, should I? What's the benefits? Just for upgrading between versions, but then you have the other things where you look at a solution and you go like, would this thing even benefit from going from 4 cores to 8 cores, or should I get faster processors and not so much more processors? Always makes for a very interesting conversation. So it was clear to me that I needed a tool to help me decide these things and to really surface some of these things and make it a little more abstract. The main issue why we can't really tell you, anybody of you, to say, if you ask me, is a Mac Mini a good server? That's the same as asking like, how long is a piece of string, right? There's no answer to that because there's a million variables. And a lot of the really important variables are unknown to me when you ask that question. And case in point is the design of the solution, the nature of the user interaction with that solution. Because sometimes say, well, let me rephrase that question. Is a Mac Mini for 25 users a good machine? I still don't know, right? Because you can have 25 users doing nothing but reading from a screen, and you can have 25 users really pounding and importing millions of records and running sub-summary reports on them. So the number of users is a very poor proxy for determining what your server spec needs to be. And even if I knew that you had 25 users all hammering away at your solution, I would need to see how it's built before I can figure out what good server to pick. So there's so many variables involved in knowing what moves the needle in performance that I needed to come up with a tool that abstracts out as much of it as I can, including network, right? If you take the same solution on the same server, but you put a crappy network between the users and the server, the results are going to be much different. And again, that's why we have so many variables that it's not even funny anymore. So we needed to abstract as many of those variables as we could. And that's why we built Punisher. And I'll show you some of the results of 19.1 and Linux all in the same thing here. And we can discuss some of those. What Punisher does, it's and you may recall from previous meetings, but it lets you spawn an X number of concurrent sessions on the server. We're using PSOS for this, so that you can really, and it runs through the same list of 16 scripts, right? So there's no variability in design or nature of the solution. It does 16 scripts, and it does it consistently on different types of servers that we put this on, or on different versions of FileMaker Server that we put this on, right? So that the results can be compared because they always do the same thing and they always do it in the same way. There's no network variability in there. So we've abstracted as much as we can so that we can figure out what is important or where the differences are, and in what aspect. Because when I talk about the list of 16 scripts, those 16 scripts try to do as good of a relevance cross-section of the typical actions that we do in our solutions. We're talking about creating records, updating records, sorting records, importing, exporting, doing some heavy computational stuff like some really complex whiles, doing some go-to related records, doing some searches on unstored calculations. So anything that we typically will find in our solutions are covered by the script. And every script does just one thing, right? So we have one script that does a sort. We have one script that does an export, so that we can measure how long that script takes and then see how it's what those numbers look like differently between different servers of FileMaker Server or different machines that we put this on. So obviously we put this on a machine with 2 cores, and then we see 1 user, 5 users, 10 users, 20 users. We put it on a machine with 8 cores, or we go to obviously I use AWS a lot because it allows me to spin up machines very, very easily. Or you pick an AWS instance that is a lot more stronger in the computational sense. So that's sort of like the backdrop for what the Punisher is. And Punisher you can download, it's free. It's on GitHub. And obviously we use Graph here for some of the fancy stuff. So let's look into, so when I say it's on GitHub, it's free, it's open source. I hope that people find it interesting and that they can download it. If you find something that doesn't do what you would expect it to do, raise an issue on GitHub or download it and fix it and let me know, and we'll put the new version on. Let me get this one out of the way. So every time that it does a test run, it basically figures out how long does a script take. And the way that this is sort of like where some of the complexity in building Punisher came into place. When you have, say, 5 concurrent sessions, so 5 perform script on server sessions, it's going to be likely that one session gets to a particular script sooner than the other ones. So I wanted to make it so that every session waits on all of the sessions to go to one script before they all collectively move on to the next thing. So that if one script is what I wanted to avoid is one script doing a sort where another one does a heavy computational while, and now the results of this sort would be impacted by this one doing a while. I didn't want it to have that kind of a pollution in there. So they're all waiting on each other. They obviously record how long they take, but then they basically wait until everybody's ready to move on to the next set of operations. All of the data obviously gets stored in FileMaker because it's a FileMaker file. What you're looking at here is it's a web viewer. Obviously, it's a pivot table JavaScript library. I like pivot tables. So the fact that we can do this now in FileMaker saves me from having to dump all of this into Excel and do it there. You're all familiar with pivot tables, so nothing fancy going on, but what it allows me to do is to move things around and select things. So a quick explanation of what we're looking at here. In the rows, like this one here, that's the name of a script. And if you download the tool, there's some explanation about what exactly the script does, so that you can figure out whether I did well in picking that script or making it do what it does. This one basically loops through a JSON array with 1,000 elements, parses every single element out, and then creates a record for each element. So that's what this script does. So this is a script. So everything that we see here is one script. Then it's broken down into types of machines, and what you see here are the number of cores in that machine. So you'll recognize this if you're somewhat familiar with AWS. You'll recognize this as an AWS instance type, and this one has 8 cores, 16 cores, 4 cores, 8 cores, down to a T3 medium with 2 cores. What we have as columns are versions of FileMaker Server, right? So we have 19.0 here, and then these are all 19.1s. We have different operating systems. And then the performance true or false is whether we were running this with the performance features turned on or off. And obviously in 19.0, data restoration is still there, but it's disabled, so you can turn it on. I didn't want to run anything 18 or 19 with the data restoration on, because really you shouldn't be using it, right? It has a nasty habit of eating your files. So even though it is faster, you really don't want to use it. So that's why it's set toggled off for my 19.0 run. Now, the 19.1 features, which is a collection of features, some of them you can turn on, some of them you can't turn on or off. So I did some runs with it with the ones turned off that I could. Interesting to know that you can turn those features on and off on Mac OS and Windows. You cannot turn them on and off on the Linux version of 19.1. So if the CentOS version, that's why we don't have a false column for that one. You can't turn them off. So that's something to keep in mind. So and then we have the number of concurrent sessions that we're running through this particular script. So 1, 5, 10, 20. Now, if you look at the cells, that's the number of seconds that it took to get through that script under the current load. And it's not just a number, there's a bit of a bar chart going on to make it visual, but the bar chart is just a representation of the number of seconds that it took to run through that. All right. So that's sort of what we're looking at when we're looking at the results of Punisher. let's see. Let me figure. I will. Actually, I'll leave this one be, but I'll toggle off Mac because we don't need that one, and just do a decent 4-core machine and don't do that. Look at the rest. So you can see these scripts. This is one script. There's a bunch of scripts. We'll jump to some of very specific scripts, but one of the things that I wanted to show is that if you look at, say, a T3 extra large 4-core machine, actually the M5 is a compute optimized machine, but I see that I didn't run it for across the board. So let's get rid of this one. Which one is that? M5 extra large. There we go. So if you look at the script that basically parses an array of 1,000 JSON elements and then creates a record for each one of those. If you look at it across the board between 19.0 and 19.1 with performance features on and off, you don't really see an impact, do you? If we focus on the T3 extra large, it took 59 seconds under a load of 20 concurrent sessions to get through that script. 62 for CentOS, 57 for Windows with the performance features turned off, and 57.5 with it. The small variations, those would basically get leveled out as I do more of these runs. So don't focus too much on hey, it's slower with the performance feature turned off. It probably isn't. It's probably just the same. So don't focus too much on the small differences. But you can see that there's no big difference in that type of operation. And that's really important when we talk about these performance features or improvements in 19.1, right? They are very real. They just don't apply to every single operation that you will do in your files. So let's find the ones that are significant, right? So here we have one that says, this is a big find on unstored calculation. Actually, let me focus on that script specifically. All right. So 19.0 took about 160 seconds on a 4-core machine. 244 seconds on a T3, which is sort of like your entry-level AWS instance, right? So it's not optimized for anything. It's a general purpose compute instance. 244 seconds to get through that. If we go to 19.1 and we go look at either Linux or Windows with the performance features on, you can see it's a dramatic improvement, right? Dramatic. If we go back to Windows and we turn off the performance improvement specifically for that, then it basically goes back to being just as slow as 19.0 is, right? So this is the single most important type of operation in your FileMaker files where you will find dramatic performance improvements between 19.1 and 19.0. And pretty much all the other operations that you can do, well, I was going to say sorting, but sorting has its own feature. But importing, exporting, looping, heavy computational stuff, creating records, deleting records, none of that will see the needle move a lot between 19.0 and 19.1. But anything that has to do with finds, and obviously this one is an actual find, right? So enter find mode, do a search on unstored calc, that is a real find. But there's many things in FileMaker that are finds or queries, right? So if you go to a layout that has a portal on it, FileMaker has to do a query or a find to produce the found set to show in the portal, right? So anything in FileMaker, go to related records, same thing. So anything that is a find or a search or a query in FileMaker will see a dramatic performance impact, but pretty much none of the other operations.
Wim, sorry, it's Dina.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I missed something. I'm seeing a big difference between Windows and CentOS, but I'm not seeing a big difference between Windows 19.0 and 19.1.
Sure.
What am I missing?
Let's see if I can make that a little clearer. Let's put that one back. Oh, no, Alex, put both of them back. So now we're looking at Windows only, right? So Windows on 19.0 and Windows on 19.1. So anything in here is 19.1, but we have two big blocks of columns there, one with the performance feature turned on and one with the performance feature turned off, right? When it says false, the performance features, which are on by default in 19.1, were turned off by me, right? So when you do a default installation of 19.1, you'll get the right-hand most columns automatically. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. So you'd have to turn the feature off to make it 19.1 behave like these columns here. Can't really select that, but these ones.
Yes, got it. Sorry, I missed that earlier.
And when you're going to cover after this, specifically how one turns performance features on and off and what the range of those features are. Great.
Yep, absolutely. So,
and I'm sorry, Wim?
Yep.
When you're talking about performance features, isn't that what you said earlier about the restoration and you should not be using it? Or are you talking about other performance features that I missed?
Probably other ones that you missed. Because 19.1 doesn't have data restoration anymore. It got pulled from the product.
Awesome.
So 18 and 19.0 both have data restoration as a feature. 18 has it enabled by default, but you can turn it off. 19.0 has it built in because it was left there, but it's turned off by default because it's a dangerous feature. So data restoration really, it's dead, right? So we shouldn't be tempted to use it. Even if you have 18 or 19.0 deployments, you shouldn't be using it.
So what performance features are you talking about?
All right.
I'm sorry, if you covered this before, I don't want to take everyone's time.
No, I think it's a good topic. So let's see if I go.
It's coming up next in the agenda, but
exactly.
The two are related. But I think there is more to cover on Punisher. So Wim, up to you whether you want to sort of jump back and forth or finish up with Punisher.
No, I think that I'm about done with Punisher. I hope to have demonstrated two things. One, the value of Punisher as a testing tool. One point that I need to make, and this is a good one. You see that I'm using two different types of AWS compute instances, right? Different types of servers, if you will. They both have 4 cores, but the C5 is a type of AWS instance that is optimized for compute. So meaning that it has, for all intents and purposes, it has faster processors, right? And you can see running the same kind of load on the 2 different types of machines, the C5 instance gets through under load, gets to its task quicker. It doesn't have more cores to do it. If I had more cores, it would still be faster, but then the T3 would get to it faster too, because all of these features that have to do with faster finds in 19.1, really, it's all about the ability to spread the load on as many processors as you have in the box. So that's why they make it faster. So if you constrain the number of processors, you can still get a faster experience for your users by going to higher clock speeds, right? And this is the age-old conundrum when you pick a machine and you look at the processing side of a machine, where do you go? Like, do you go for really fast processors or do you go for a really big number of cores? And there's a real trade-off between the two. Very often, when you increase the number of cores in a machine, the clock speed of the processor goes down. And that's a heat thing, right? So they can't really cram all that many cores on a chip without the thing melting if they keep the clock speed up. So it's a real thing that needs to be decided, but you can see where the needle moves, right? So I can go grab better performance by getting a machine that is faster at each job. I can probably also grab a machine with more cores and get a little bit better performance there too. But using a tool like Punisher lets you experiment with that before you decide on what, and you would decide based on the knowledge of your solution, obviously, but you can then get to choose based on what you see in Punisher, what would have the biggest impact on your performance.
Is there a big difference in price between the T-type and the C-type EC2 instances?
I don't know if there's obviously a difference in price, right? The faster you go, the more you have to pay, and faster could be in processor speed, but also in disk speed or network speed.
Right.
So the faster you go, the more expensive it gets. I don't know off the top of my head what the price differential is between these two.
Okay.
Hey, Wim, would you mind showing us, Punisher, just take us out and like show us how you would set it up? I saw there were configuration options, just
Yep.
so if we download it and start playing with it, we have a little bit of a head start.
Yep, absolutely. So under here, under configurations, these are all the different machine types configurations that I run tests with. So you would come in here, create a records, add some information about the number of cores, so that the numbers, when you do comparison, the numbers make sense. You pick what operating system that you have. And then in essence, you go and run a new test. You choose your configuration from the list of configurations that you've set up. You can choose what scripts that you want to run. Typically, I run all of them, but if you really want to focus your testing on just a single type of operation, you can do that too. You can set a start time and an end time. You can say, let's start 5 minutes from now, and so like force abort in 4 hours from now, right? If this thing gets into, I don't know, a deadlock or a thing, then the Punisher will gracefully bail out at that stage. If you want a single test, you can say, I want to test this with 100 concurrent PSOS sessions, right? So you can get to decide the number here, or you can just click this button, which is sort of my default, and this will cycle through all the tests, and we'll do one with 1 concurrent user, 1 with 5, 1 with 10, 1 with 20. So that's in essence how you do it. Punisher will stay open on your machine, but it will spawn off these perform script on server sessions and then check in with them. And at the end of the day, at the end of the run, it'll then bring it back to you and say, yep, I'm done, and here are my results.
How would you test? I put a post in the chat, but how would you simulate actions like opening and closing solutions? Like some users would log in, log out dozens of times, and if they are running a opening script that opens other files, either relationally or specifically, does that impact other users that are actually doing these processes right now?
That's a good question. I don't think that Punisher would be best fitted for that kind of testing because of the fact that while it spawns perform script on servers, and that to a very limited extent mimics what happens when a user opens a solution, it's not quite the same thing, right? Because it doesn't go through the full opening sequence necessarily, or it doesn't have to spawn windows. Let's put that question in the back pocket, because I will touch on how you would be able to test that and see what the impact is. And that's using something that is new in 19.1 that will get you better information about that than you have been able to get up to this point.
And so Wim, I see there's an import and export, because you're going to put this file, obviously you're going to host it on each of the servers where you want to run this test, and then you're pulling the data, you're exporting the data and pulling it into, so you have a file to do the comparison. Is that right?
Pretty much. Sometimes I just close the file on one server and then physically move it to another one if I move between servers that I'm testing, so that I don't have to do the export import. But yes, you can just export a run or a set of runs from one Punisher file and import them into your master. Absolutely.
Great, thanks. Any other questions about Punisher before we move on? Nope, doesn't sound like it. So,
all right.
So it's only $300 a month. Is that right, Punisher?
Yes, I'll send you my bank account information right after this. Buy me coffee sometime. So the question was, what are the new features in 19.1 that make for better performance? The single most important one is described here, and you can read it, so I don't need to read it. But it really comes down in essence to the way that FileMaker locks a file when it has to read or write to the to or from the file, right? Anything before 19.1 uses an exclusive lock. And we're not talking about logs that take a long time. These are blazingly fast, lock release, lock release, lock release, but they all happen because they were exclusive. They all happen in sequence, right? They didn't happen in parallel. So what the Claris engineers have done in 19.1 is they made it a sharing lock, so that for reading, not for writing, but for reading, they can have multiple locks going on at the same time, so that you can have multiple in parallel reading operations going on at the same time. And reading operations, that's fine, right? So that's trying to get some information from your file. You're not trying to create new records or updating records. You're trying to get information from the file. So that's what reading is all about. So in a nutshell, that's the single biggest feature change that was made in 19.1. That's what they call a sharing lock. All right. There are a number of other features as well. So number one, that's the that sharing lock. So there's another. There's these three. There's four of the other ones. There's also a feature whereby the client and the server can and will negotiate who will do a sort on your file. If the server is capable of doing the sort, the server will do the sort instead of the client doing that. So your sort may be a lot faster depending on the circumstances. It's a little annoying in the sense that those circumstances are not really well defined. So you can do the exact same sort by the same user from the same file set, all of that, and sometimes it'll happen on the server and sometimes it'll happen on the client. So so it's a little unpredictable when that happens or how it happens. The other thing to keep in mind, and Hamza did a really good presentation on the effect of that. It could be that the way that FileMaker does the initial sort, like if you have a big file set and it hasn't been sorted yet, that first sort is going to take a while, right? But then every second sort or subsequent sort that you do on the client will be a lot faster because a lot of the data has been cached and all of that good stuff. If you do the sort server side, the first one will be quicker, but every subsequent one will be just as fast or just as slow as the first one, right? And because it happens on the server, there's a little bit of overhead involved. The second, third, fourth sort will actually be slower than the second, third, fourth one that would happen on the clients. So there's some things that you'll have to experiment with, whether it makes sense for your solution to take advantage of that particular feature. And then there's the memory-based key comparison. That is a bit of an edge case, could be very relevant, but it speaks to the constructs where you have a text field, a multi-line text field, and you use it as the key in your relationship, right? So a multi-line key relationship, we've all done that. The way that was resolved in anything before 19.1 was that it happens more or less disk-based, right? So there was a lot of caching of the data and all of that stuff. That resolving of that relationship that is based on a multi-line key now happens entirely in memory. So that adds more performance. So there's a couple of other ones, smaller ones, but those are the big three. And of the big three, that first one, that sharing lock, is the absolute #1 feature. That is the one that is responsible for those dramatic changes in performance on anything that is related to finds in FileMaker. Make sense? All right. Let's go here. No, not there. Here. Let me move this here. All right. So when I said that you can turn the features off, the performance features, you do that by virtue of creating a release debug on text file. And on the server, and this is actually a Linux server, where am I? Okay. So I have it here on my server. It's actually a file that can exist on the client to enable, disable certain features, or you put it on the server and you put it in the database server folder, which on Mac OS and Linux is the bin subfolder of database server. On Windows, it's just the database server. But by virtue of putting the file there, you will basically you can enable and disable certain features, and you do that by adding what they call flags. All right, so basically you string a text that you put in there to say, hey, enable this feature if it's not one that is enabled by default, or disable a feature if it is enabled by default, right? So that sharing lock, the memory key indexing, the last feature that said the multi-line key, the way that it evaluates in memory, those are all features that are on by default, but you can turn them off, right? So you can do disable memory key, CMP indexing, or disable server-side sorting, which is a feature that's on by default. Or disable sharing lock on server, right? So that is the flag that I use to turn off the #1 feature and really make my server 19.1 behave like 19.0 or 18. So that's how that works. And it was kind of interesting, and that's why it came to be on the agenda for today in a conversation with Jonathan and myself is, if you attended that last Under the Hood session with the Claris engineers, I think Clay Mackel was mentioning like, well, it's really a feature for testing. You shouldn't be using that. This is sort of like an ETS thing. You really shouldn't be using that for production. I was really surprised by that, because all through ETS, when they announced that they would have these big features, performance features in 19.1, one of my early conversations with them was, how do I turn it off, right? Because my clients are going to be nervous after what happened with 18. If you enable a feature by default and I have no way to turn it off, and it turns out that it's eating my files like 18 did, I'm not going to be very happy, right? So I need to have a way to turn that off. And so this is what they came up with. So for Clay to say that it was something that we shouldn't be using was a little surprising, because I think that power, as developers, we need that power. We need to be able to turn it on, turn it off, depending on how our solution behaves, right? So that behavior that Hamza discovered and graphed that I just described about sorting, and how the second, third, fourth sort that happens by a client is really fast, even if you incur a bit of a penalty on the first one. Whereas if everything happens on the server, they're all equal in performance, but they may be, the second, third, and fourth one may be slower than what you get otherwise. So maybe you don't want that behavior in your solution, right? Then you want to be able to turn that off. So that's what those features are.
Question?
Go ahead.
You just mentioned that there was a function in FileMaker 18 that was corrupting or eating files. Can you clarify what you were referring to?
Absolutely. FileMaker 18 had a FileMaker Server 18, and this is nothing to do with the client, has a feature called the data restoration. I don't have a FileMaker Server 18 running that I could go to very quickly. It is not a feature that you can see in the admin console, but it is a feature that is on by default. So if you install a FileMaker 18, it's on, you'll have it. And you can turn it off by going to the command line and explicitly turning the feature off. Now, under certain circumstances, not across the board, obviously, but there have been enough instances for FileMaker to want to back out of it. Under certain circumstances, it will actually corrupt your files. There's really no shorter way to put this, right? So it'll damage your files, which is why when you install FileMaker 18, you really should be turning it off. Or when you install 19, you should leave it off. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So if I go, right. So this is that release debug on file that I have on this particular Linux server. There's nothing enabled, so there's a comment. They're all commented out at this point. This file doesn't exist, right? When you install your FileMaker server, that file doesn't exist. You have to explicitly create it and then populate it. So I only have force output in there. Doesn't really do anything. except that it creates these debug logs, which are kind of interesting. So you can sort of see, as soon as you create that file with the force outputs, it will create a log file where at every restart of your FileMaker server, it will tell you what features are enabled or disabled. And then we'll output a lot of interesting debug information. Now, the question that was asked a little while ago, whether Punisher can help test the performance impact of users opening and closing the solutions and everything that goes into that opening sequence, whether it's part of your open script or just by virtue of going to a particular layout. The typical way before 19.1 to troubleshoot that is to enable the top call stats log, right? Because if the operation of opening your file is expensive, there will be evidence of that in your top call stats log, and it'll help figure out what exactly it is. And typically, if it's an expensive opening of your solution, you'll find something like download list or compare modification counts. Those are your two big ones as operations that FileMaker client does and negotiates with FileMaker server that typically can take up a lot of time. That actually reminds me, there's another interesting tidbit about that. So download list basically speaks to the fact that if your file opens on a table view or list view on a million records found set, something like that, FileMaker is going to be trying to be helpful, and it will try to cache a bunch of data for you. You probably didn't intend for that to happen, but that's what's going to happen. So you'll see some evidence of your client downloading a bunch of stuff from the server. So you'll see that in the top call stats log. Same if your client has local cache, which since FileMaker 15, every client has a persistent local cache. When you open the solution, your client will negotiate with server to say, hey, of my cache, what part of it is stale? So it'll show up in a top call stats log as comparing modification count, where a client and server will basically go to their list and say, do you have this one? Do you have this one? Oh, this is a new one. I'll send that one to you. So that's what client and server are doing. So you'll find some evidence of that in the top call stats log. The downside of the top call stats log is that it's a bit of a scattershot log because it only records the 25 most expensive operations in the logging interval, which is typically 30 seconds. So if you have a busy environment, the 25 most expensive things may be a few from that user and a few from that user and a few from that user. So it's kind of difficult to get a unified picture of what it takes to do one operation by one user. Like one user opening a solution, what is all the things that are happening when all of that happens. Now, if we go back to our release debug on text file, we have this flag here, remote calls, right, on line number 21. This is not something you would do on the server. You can, right? This is sort of like if you do this on the server, it'll make a master top call stats log. Instead of doing the 25 most expensive one, it'll record everything, which is great. But if you have a busy environment, that file will get very big in a hurry. And this is the kind of thing that may have an impact on your FileMaker server because it's got to log every single call that comes in on the server. So while you can do that on the server, you probably don't want to do that on the server. Just know that you can. But you can create this file, this release debug on text file. I can never remember the name, whether it's debug release or release debug. That's why I keep looking at my file name. So you create that file on the client side and you drop it where your FileMaker Pro application is, in essence. That's where that file lives. And you add remote calls. Now, what will happen client side is you'll have something like this. It's a fairly big file, but I will try and open it anyway. There we go. Right. So this is the equivalent of the top call stats log, but has only calls generated from that client to the server. So this is great for troubleshooting, right? So if you want to troubleshoot that opening sequence, you create the file, you open the solution on that one client, you wait until the file is opened, and you grab a copy of that file. You now have a complete list of every single operation that your client has asked the FileMaker server during that sequence. I think it's pretty darn fantastic. plus timing and all of that stuff. So we haven't heard too much about that yet in the community, but those like me who do a lot of troubleshooting and performance impact analysis and all of that stuff, that is my great new shiny tool right there. So I think it's
Hey, Wim, that's for 19 only, right?
19.1, not 19, yeah. So
Fine.
not even 19.0, 19.1.
Client, okay.
And Wim, because when I look at this file, I see nothing in terms of information. A lot of data, but not a lot of information. Would you pull this into some sort of other tool to analyze it, or what would you do with this? You know, you're trying to troubleshoot something. You get this, debug log file. Well, what's your action you take on it? First step.
It's still early days, so we're still trying to make sense. We have the same problem with this log like we have with the top call stats log.
Right.
If you ever looked at the top call stats log, it's pretty uninformative at first glance. Right?
And I agree.
Yeah. So it says, here's an operation like download with lock, right? And I go like, what the hell is download with lock? Like, where does that fit in with what I know that I'm doing, like opening a file or going to a layout? The thing to remember here is that what is logged here is called a call. Any operation that we do, the evaluation of a calculation, going to a layout, doing a go to related records, is going to be broken down into any number of calls. We don't quite know how many calls every single thing is, but that's the one thing to keep in mind. And just like with the top call stats log, there's a bit of a knowledge gap between that, like the things that we know, like go to layout, and what it breaks down to a number of operations. So it's still early days. We're still trying to get more information from the engineers as to exactly what every single type of operation means and what it could be spawned from. But there's going to be clues in there. We just don't know. We just don't have a master list yet of what all those clues are.
Right. And I guess since it's just on the client, you could, debug and, go to do one step in your script, look at the log, do the next step in your script, since it's only coming from that client, it's sequential, that would give you a lot more ability to, sort of connect the dots that you're asking for than when it's on the server, when you could have 10 different clients doing, who knows what, and you have no idea what's generating those calls.
You got it, exactly right. And that's why this tool is so powerful, because now it allows us to do these kinds of fingerprints, right? Whereas the top call stats log, it's too scattershot. It's really difficult. Sure, you can set up a server and be the only client, but still you'd only get 25 of them. Maybe there's 100 of them and you need to see all 100 of them to make sense of it. This one allows you to do that kind of very targeted testing, like single out one operation and see what the log shows, right? So I think over time, we'll get a better sense of what the fingerprint is of these types of operations.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of, I guess pretty brand new territory that they're giving us these this ability to turn on and off specific, very, very low level features, both on the client and on the server. And to a certain extent, and I just put into the chat a link to an entry on the Soliant blog talking about each of these feature flags. But it's also a bit daunting to think about starting to try to, it's great that we have these levers that we can pull and buttons we can push, but it's also, there's a lot of combinations. It's not just like one, turn this on or turn this off. It's all, if you turn this one on, but turn that one off, or turn them both on, or turn them both off, there's just a lot of combinations or permutations.
Absolutely. To some extent, this is one of those where be careful what you wish for, right? Because as developers and as deployers, we're always asking for more power, right? So, and clearly this is giving us more power, but especially initially we go like, so now what? Like, what do we do with this? So it will fall on us to really go to town with this and really figure out what it means and all of that. And that's why I was so surprised for the Claris engineers to say, we shouldn't be using that. If that is their stance, I will very, very much try to make it not so, right? Because this is exactly the kind of power that we need. And obviously, I'm not so happy with the fact that we have to create a text file to do some of these things. I would want to see that unified in the admin console and the admin API and the admin CLI. But I'm not too worried about the fact that I need to go to a text file, because these are not your typical operations that your typical FileMaker administrators would necessarily need to do. This is high-end stuff. But having said that, I don't want Claris engineers to take this away and hide it and say only early builds of ETS, right? So we need to have this, and we need to have it always.
I would guess that the message perhaps that they were trying to convey was that the average user should not need to mess with this unless they're testing something specifically, that the default settings when you install the server are good settings, that it's not a requirement that you go in and tweak and tune these, but it's obviously available.
Yep, exactly.
Wim, for the great performance that 19.1 server gives you, do you have to be on 19.1 client, or can you be on 18 or 19.0?
It's a good question. Every time you mix and match client and servers, you're not going to get the full benefit of all the features, right? Because there's a lot of negotiation that happens between client and server. While you will get a decent amount of the performance impact on everything that happens server side, because it's server side where that log sharing happens, right? So you'll still get a fair amount of the benefits, but you won't get the full gamut of it.
Got it. And not to jump to possibly the end, but like if you've got a client that's on 17 server or whatever, and they've got a bunch of unstored calcs, you could spend a bunch of time analyzing and try to figure out what's gumming things up. Or if they're licensed, you could just move them to 19.1. And it could just disappear because of the huge performance impacts.
It could, and we're actually working through a couple of clients that have huge performance issues, and the fact that they're experimenting with 19.1 and the performance impact is big enough that they now go like, well, maybe we don't need to touch our solution. I'm going like, no, you really do need to touch your solution, right? But you can buy yourself some time, right? You can punt on the problem. The underlying problem doesn't go away, right? So if there's really inefficient design, it's going to come around and bite you again. It's just a matter of time. But you can buy yourself some decent time.
Would you move someone to 19.1 with no qualms?
Short answer, yes, I would move them to 19.1. But I'm not going to say it's without qualms. But that's just the nature of where we are in the transition with the quick release cycles. I don't know how much time we have left there, Jonathan, but feel free to shut me up whenever you need to.
No, we have flexibility because.
Yeah. I'm actually going to show one more thing after this that speaks to the release cycles. We're in the middle of Claris releasing features and products very quickly. Wouldn't surprise me if we see another version of at least server before the year's end. So every time that happens, our old school thinking of being conservative, because we talked about CentOS way back at the beginning of the meeting, I like to be that way. I like to be conservative and not be the early adopter and all of that stuff. That's kind of tough to do these days, right? Because we have these quick sequences of releases, and we don't have the big release with features and then stability releases anymore. Every single release will fix something that may have been broken in the past and introduce new things. That makes it a little tougher to decide whether or not to move up. But in this case, the benefits are big enough that if you have a client that is suffering right now, I would very seriously consider it, knowing that if push comes to shove, I can turn this feature off, just like I could in 18, right? So I can mitigate my risk a little bit by knowing that I can turn it off.
Or you could roll back to the prior version.
Exactly.
A quick clarification.
That's a good point. You should probably factor that into your deployment plan or your plan in general, right? The fact that you may have to take their solution down and roll back should be part of that conversation with the clients.
Quick clarification, Wim. I think I heard that in some instances, maybe it has to do with the where the sort happens, client or server. You need 19.1.2 for that to happen? Isn't it true that on some of those features you have to have the latest version or the?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
When I think I had it in here. No, in here. So no, where did I put it? There. So say these are the number 4, the 4 biggest performance feature impacting related changes. That number 1, the share unlock, is the one that has the single biggest impact, and that is a server-side only feature, right? So that's what you get some benefits by your clients not having there. But the one that I have it here, the sorting number 2, which is the second best performance impacting feature for 19. That one absolutely must have 19.1 client, absolutely.
And Wim, can you touch on number 4 a little bit, the script?
Yes, that is basically a sort of like a lessons learned from Claris. Part of the set of circumstances that would munch up your file in 18 when you have data restoration on was the fact that you had temp files, cache files on the server that were growing way out of proportion, and FileMaker Server trying to maintain that got so widely out of whack that it contributed to the instability of FileMaker Server. Actually, I have some screenshots of this one, because I think that will make it a little more clear. Now, if you install server 19.1 and you go to schedules, not backup schedules, but script schedules, and you select, I forget the exact name, but the schedule that runs OS level scripts. And the way that works typically is you put your VB script or your Apple script or your shell script, you put that in the scripts folder on the FileMaker Server. And whatever you put in there will show up in this pick list. With 19.1 server, even if you have nothing in that scripts folder, you'll have 2 potential like magic scripts that will show up that you can pick, and one of them is the purge 10db one. And it's actually recommended that you make a schedule that runs this once a day, middle of the night, and it'll purge and let FileMaker Server do some maintenance on its own temp files. So doing that increases the stability of your FileMaker Server. I'm sure in future versions of FileMaker Server, we'll see this rolled into the products, so without you having to create it. But for now, it's one of the things you have to create after the fact, after you install FileMaker Server.
And I have a follow-up question on the location of those temp files. Do you know offhand if you have, say, your OS on one volume and FileMaker Server on another and your files on a third, where do those temp files typically get created?
They go where the operating system keeps its temp files,
okay.
Which by default is the C drive. But you can reconfigure your Windows, if you're talking about Windows, to pick another location for that.
At the OS level.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Yeah, they're giving us a whole bunch of new things to play with and to do.
Yep. So the other thing that I wanted to show, and that could be the last thing. See if I can find it. It's this one. I was curious to see in FileMaker Cloud, like what versions of FileMaker Server, because we think of FileMaker Cloud as FileMaker Cloud, and they make the same kind of big jumps, FileMaker Cloud 18, FileMaker Cloud 19. But I was curious to see what kind of builds that they release throughout the life cycle of your FileMaker Cloud. So you can grab a couple of logs from your FileMaker Cloud instance, and what you're seeing there is over time, you can these ones like line numbers 16 through 23 are the interesting ones, right? So this goes back about, I forget how long it is, but I think this instance probably a year or so. So you can sort of see when FileMaker Server releases different builds of their products, and these don't necessarily correspond with the builds that we get for the on-premise version, right? So they are on different release cycles. but it was kind of interesting to see for the majority, and we know that that's where Claris wants to be, is if you look at the build date of, say, this one on line 20, right? So the build dates, there was 6 days between the build date and the release date, between them doing the final build on that server version and putting it in production on their FileMaker Cloud. And we see there's a couple of bigger ones like 20 days and 25 days here, but by and large, it's about, say, 6 to 10 days between them wrapping up development work and doing the golden master on their build and putting it into production. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And clearly that's where they want to go, right? Even with their on-premise versions, we should expect and anticipate a very quick succession of server builds and client builds, for that matter, in the next over the next year.
Wim, I know we had on the topic list talking about the Linux version. You mentioned earlier that you don't have the ability to toggle the performance features the same way. Anything else on the Linux build that comes to mind? Is it ready for prime time in your estimation, or is it still early? Wait a couple more versions. What's your general take on it?
It's very much ready for prime time, mainly because it's not new, right? This version of FileMaker Server has been in existence for about 2 years now, because it's what FileMaker uses for their FileMaker Cloud. So it's not any less robust than Mac OS or Windows. The only thing that's, and I'm using Termius, you can see it right here as a tool here. I just want to do a bit of a shout out. It's not a free tool. It's not even that cheap, but I absolutely love it, mainly because it has an SFTP. It has SFTP built in, so I can easily move files between my desktop and any of my servers without having to do too much command line stuff. I can have multiple sessions open, but one of the really neat things is that it has a really nice snippet builder in there. So if I want to figure out how I stop FileMaker Server, I can just have the command in here and then paste it in and away you go, right? So you may all think that I'm this Linux guru, but I get lazy like the next person. So I just have a nice list of snippets in there that I go to. And obviously there's many other snippet tools that you can do, but the reason that I use a tool like that is because I have a great many FileMaker servers. I have 12 FileMaker servers on Linux right now, plus I have 17 Raspberry Pis that are doing some production stuff. So so for me, having a unified tool, this tool is really nice because it syncs between devices. So it even syncs to my iPad. So if I have an emergency, I can still do the same things from my iPad. So it's kind of cool. So prime time, absolutely. I would not hesitate to put it in use. What I'm showing here now is an ebook that will get released. So don't record this or cut it out. It'll get released in the next couple of weeks. And I may have shown in that ebook, I also tackled the myth, right? Because I'm sure that we talked about this at one of the previous FMDiSCs, and it has come up on the community forums already, where people think, I'm going to use Linux because everything's going to be so much faster, right? It isn't, right? It really isn't. Linux is not that magical. Linux is not going to make your Mazda 3 into a Ferrari. It's a very decent, very robust operating system, but your solution is going to behave exactly the same like it is on Windows or Mac OS, right? An operating system doesn't move the needle. Your design moves the needle. How much resources you give your server moves the needle, not the operating system.
Wim, do you think they'll bring the features in the Linux version up to where they're all basically the same?
Largely, I would say yes, right? Because for them, it's a pain to maintain different feature sets across different products. I think their drive is to make sure that every single version is exactly the same. What's a little unclear is what that means for cutting the long tail, right? Like we know that the Linux version doesn't have XML, PHP, web publishing. I don't think that's going to come back, right? I think the unification there is going to be having it removed from Mac OS and Windows. Things like Active Directory authentication, Open Directory authentication, I'm not sure what that means, right? I don't see them taking that away from the Mac and Windows versions, but will they put enough engineering effort to bring it to Linux? I'm not entirely sure. They may decide not to, because modern authentication through OpenID, Connect, and OAuth, like we talked about, that's the way of the future. And all flavors of FileMaker Server already do it. So there may be things that we're going to lose along the way, or I would say insignificant changes in behavior that are going to remain between the versions.
So going away like Flash is going away sort of thing.
Yep.
All right. I think we're pretty much at the end of our time. So Wim, thank you so much for sharing all that information. As I said, there's a lot coming at us. We're getting a lot more tools and options, and it's really fantastic to have you, A, doing the research, and then B, sharing it with the community the way you have done for many years. So I think we all owe you a great debt of gratitude.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Wim.
Yes, thanks. All right.
Yay.
Hey, Scott. Thank you. Hey.
We're putting the band back together.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's back.
Long time member of FMDiSC. I guess we could call you a prodigal son who left us and moved to some other state, which we won't talk about. Like Elon Musk, you were the trailblazer for Elon Musk. We have to say, Scott, right?
Yeah.
So
Austin?
He's moving to Texas. I don't know where specifically.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, he's opened up a big Tesla factory there.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, there was big.
I hear they need Airtable.
The best thing about the pandemic was that I could get back into the FMDiSC meetings again.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, so Scott's going to talk about Airtable today. So Scott, take it away. You should be able to share your screen and
okay, great.
Talk to us about Airtable.
Okay, great.
And
hey, okay, so you guys can
please mute yourselves.
Okay, great. And you guys can hear me okay because I'm on the AirPods?
Loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. So most of you guys know me. I run a one-man shop called Scott World. And by the way, Wim, I want to thank you so much for that presentation. From what I was hearing, FileMaker Server 19.1 is the server product I've always been looking for in terms of speed for FileMaker and features. But we're going to go with this presentation. We're now going to go from the super advanced to the super basic. We're going to go from FileMaker to Airtable. We're going to go in a totally different direction. And Airtable sort of bills themselves as a part database and part spreadsheet program. And you know what they say when you're sort of a jack of all trades, you're not really an expert in either of them. It does a little bit of database stuff well, and it does a little bit of spreadsheet stuff well, and that's about it. And it leaves you there. So before I get into Airtable, I just want to give you a bit of my background here. I am in case you don't know who I am, I'm a certified FileMaker developer in all the versions from 7 through 19. And I've been developing since January 1992. So next month, it'll be 29 years of my FileMaker development. And now I have a new title called Expert Airtable Developer. I've been doing this for a few years now. And I'm also the author of a beginning level course called Learning Airtable, which you can find on LinkedIn Learning and lynda.com. So if you want to learn Airtable even more than what I'll be discussing today, you can check out my courses. And Airtable actually selected me as one of their top 10 experts in their community forums, which was very cool. It showed me that I had catapulted to sort of the advanced level of Airtable pretty quickly because it's a relatively shallow product. And I don't mean that like in a real negative way, but it's shallow compared to FileMaker. it sort of reminds me of the FileMaker 2.1 days, with a little bit of modern 2020 stuff thrown into it. And oops. And now, surprisingly, this is the big surprise, which I was not expecting. 95% of my business now comes from Airtable development instead of FileMaker. And I was not expecting that. We're going to talk about why that may be. So how did this all come to be? A few years ago, I took a backpacking trip through Europe, and it was a completely, I went for 4 months backpacking through Europe, and here's some photos of my experiences. And I decided that this was going to be a totally impromptu, improvised trip. I didn't know which countries I was going to go to. I ended up going to 15 different countries. I didn't know how many days I was going to be staying in any place. I was just going to be jumping on the train and going to the next place. I only had a one-way ticket to Europe. I didn't even know when I was going to get my return flight, and everything was impromptu. But I needed a way, I decided, to keep track of all the different cities and countries and tourist sites that I wanted to visit. And at first I was typing it all up in Apple Notes, and then it got a little too crazy and cluttered because I wanted to cross-reference things. I wanted to put dates on things. I wanted to check things off when they were done. And I realized I needed a database for it. And I was going to create a FileMaker database to keep track of this. But what happened was that I was already in Europe by the time I decided I needed to get a little bit organized. And I didn't want to spend a lot of time creating something in FileMaker. I also wanted something that was going to synchronize between all my devices. And I don't have my own FileMaker server. As a one-man shop, all my clients, they all have their own FileMaker servers. I didn't want to put my own personal travel agenda on their FileMaker server. I just didn't feel, I'm sure they would have let me, any of my clients, I have 200 clients, that have their own FileMaker servers, but I didn't want to put my own personal database, as small as it was, on one of their servers. And I was like, do I really want to pay, to set up my own FileMaker server? I said, no, I don't want to do that. I said, I just want to find something quick, easy, that would be on a server somewhere, that would synchronize my travel itinerary and all my notes between my iPhone, my iPad, and my Mac. And I wanted it in a customizable database form. So I had a few requirements here. Number one, I wanted it to be free. Number two, I wanted it to be cloud-based, and I wanted it to have no setup at all. Like, even if I signed up for FileMaker Cloud, that's cloud-based, but then there'd be, a couple minutes of setup. I just wanted to get up and go. I was already in Europe. I was already there. I was already enjoying life. I didn't want to deal with any sort of management of anything. I wanted to synchronize across my devices. I wanted it to be quick. I wanted this thing up and running in like 5 minutes. And I wanted it to be super, super easy because I was on vacation. And, basically, I wanted something fun. And the funny thing is, one of the reasons I didn't want to do it in FileMaker was because I would be like, that actually feels a lot like work. I was like, I don't want something that feels like work. I wanted something fun. I was on vacation for an unknown number of months. And so I stumbled upon Airtable. And this is what I created. There's actually more to it than this, but this is sort of like a little screenshot of the travel itinerary that I created. And I was able to whip this together in approximately 90 seconds, maybe even less. I might even be over exaggerating. And then as my trip went on, I started adding some more features and things like that to it. But within about 90 seconds, I had this customizable screen that was on my iPhone, on my iPad. It was free. I have another screen that's not part of the screenshot here that had my travel itinerary with dates and times and all this stuff. So it was really, really exciting for me to have this experience for myself. So after my trip was done, I came back home and I started looking in Airtable. I was like, well, gosh, that really served me very, very well on my trip. I said, could I potentially develop solutions for people in Airtable? Maybe some people only need Airtable instead of FileMaker. And I started looking into it. I started diving into it more deeply. And what I realized very, very quickly was that Airtable is not FileMaker. And what I mean by that is that this is FileMaker. This is the SS FileMaker. This is, it's like a cruise ship. We've got everything. It runs, oops, you already saw the punchline here because I accidentally skipped ahead. But the thing is that the FileMaker is a cruise ship. It can run some of the largest enterprises on the planet. It's advanced. It does everything we want. You could live on a cruise ship. People do that now. I understand that that's like the new thing. People are when they retire, they sell their home and they buy a cruise suite for a year or whatever. And this is FileMaker. Everything in one platform. You could do everything that you want. It's incredible. This is Airtable. It's a scooter. This is what you get with Airtable. It's you don't get any of those amenities that you would expect on a cruise ship. But so that was my big disappointment. When I came back home and I started seriously looking at Airtable, I was like, oh my gosh, this doesn't do anything that I needed to do, that my clients would potentially need it to do. But it turns out, as I started diving into the community forums and people started reaching out to me for help, it turns out that a lot of people actually like scooters. And it turns out, which I never realized until I accidentally stumbled into Airtable, that it turns out that if you need to get very quickly from your house down to the Starbucks at the corner and back again, a cruise ship is overkill. In fact, a cruise ship would actually probably be the exact wrong tool to get you from your apartment down to the Starbucks and back to your apartment again very, very quickly. And it turns out that there is a huge demand for scooters as opposed to cruise ships. I didn't know this. I did not know this. I have become an accidental overnight Airtable success story with business. 2020, the year of the pandemic, was one of my best years ever in terms of business. And it's because of Airtable. I had no idea. And again, so here, check this out. Here's Google Trends. This is over the last year. Airtable is in red, FileMaker is in blue. Airtable is trending higher, is always trending higher, or for the most part, trending higher than FileMaker on this graph. This is over the last year. It's the same thing for the last 5 years, actually. I just took a snapshot of the last year here. And that doesn't really mean anything because once people are using a product, they're not really searching for it on Google anymore. But what might also be of interest is that the Alexa site rankings over the last 90 days, and this actually is the same for a year and 2 years and 5 years as well. I just chose the last 90 days. Airtable is ranked number 963 and Claris is ranked number 21,787. And what that means is Claris is ranked 22 times lower, and that matches my experience perfectly, actually, identically, I mean, is that my experience is that now only 1 in 20 inquiries through my website are for FileMaker. 19 out of 20 inquiries are for Airtable. I was not expecting this at all. I want to let you know, I am as surprised as anybody else who would be to learn this information. And in case you're wondering, well, maybe people are going to FileMaker.com instead of Claris.com, I checked, and FileMaker is ranked even lower on Alexa than Claris. So, anecdotal experience, I now have dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of Airtable clients. And I have to tell you guys something, you guys, all of us are FileMaker experts, and all of them would be better served by FileMaker than Airtable, every single one of them. And I can't get them to switch to FileMaker. Once they're hooked, they're hooked. I have never seen such a passionate, rabid group of customers in my entire life. These people are cheerleaders for Airtable. It's sort of like the early days of, I'm trying to think what I would compare it to. Maybe the early days of the iPhone, maybe, but that became such a mass sensation so quickly. I'm trying to think, maybe like back, probably a better example would be back in the 90s, the Mac users like myself who were rabidly addicted to the Mac, even though the Mac was like almost unheard of. So every single one of my clients would be better off served by FileMaker. They will not switch, and I've tried. And they had a virtual Airtable conference earlier this year. Here's another interesting thing. The average age was in the late 20s. There was only 2 guys there in their 40s. It was me and some other guy. And 80% of the attendees were female. This is like completely opposite of from what I've anecdotally experienced from FileMaker conferences. So they seem to be attracting a completely different demographic. It's a young and primarily female demographic. And I'm talking about the developers. This is a developers conference. So Airtable's not FileMaker. What do I mean by that? I would say it's a 1 to 100 ratio. And I might be being generous here. I might be being generous. For every 100 features that you guys have, that we, all of us, the FileMaker community that we have in FileMaker, for every 100 features, Airtable might have 1 of those features. That's what a vast world of difference it is. For example, there's no custom layouts in Airtable. You get 5 layouts to choose from, and that's it. There's no PDF support. Think about that. No PDFs. There's very limited outputs. They do have a very minimal thing where you can create sort of like your own little printed layout, and then you can click on a print button, and then you have to use your own computer's PDF functionality to generate the PDF from it. There's no global fields. There's no lookup fields. All your fields have to be related. There's no such thing as just like copying and pasting from another table. There's very, very limited value lists. There's no such thing as conditional value lists. And you can't reuse value lists across multiple fields. Again, takes us back to the FileMaker 2.1 days where every value list was attached to a field. And if you wanted that value list to show up in another field, you would have to recreate that value list all over again. Very weak button support, nothing like what we're used to in FileMaker at all. The buttons can do a couple tiny things, but that's it. Again, think about the buttons that were back in FileMaker 2 days. There's really no real security. Stephen Blackwell, you would have a heart attack if you saw how bad the security was in Airtable. I've identified 9 security flaws that I call security flaws. For example, even if you assign a user as a read-only user, someone that can only read the data, but they can't edit the data, they're still allowed to download all the data from your system onto their own hard drives. They're still allowed to duplicate the entire database into their own private workspace. And you don't even know that they've made a duplicate of it. So even if you fire that person as an employee, they still have full access to all the data that they copied. If they copied data out of your system, they could copy your entire database. There's a lot of little security flaws like that. They have these things that are like our container fields called attachment fields. And even if you upload an image, then you delete it from your database, it still lives on for a year at its previous URL because every image gets a URL. Now those URLs aren't revealed publicly, but you may want to share the URL with people. And once that URL is shared, it lives on at that URL for an entire year, even if you delete it from your database. And they do that because they have these built-in backups and restores. So they leave them living on at that URL so you can restore it later. But these are security issues. These are real security issues. And whenever I bring on someone as a client and tell them about the Airtable security limitations, they're always like, you know, it doesn't bother them enough to switch to FileMaker. You know, whether that's right or wrong, I can't make their decisions for them, but I alert them to these things. I even give them a PDF file.
Can I just ask a question? So if you have like a corporate client though, how do they, like, are they just, oh, we'll just buy, we don't care about corporate standards? Or are you typically not running, you're running into very small companies who are running Airtable? I just can't imagine how a corporate client could allow copying of their data like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of, it's a good question. Yeah, a lot of times it's smaller teams that are within these larger corporations. I am actually working with some very large corporations. Sometimes people will slightly alter how they use Airtable. There's also third-party products that provide front ends for Airtable that they then end up paying extra for, an extra $300 a month for this one product that I'll show you guys a glimpse of later if we have time. And what that does is that actually gives a website that they can log into that gives access to all their Airtable data, but doesn't let people copy data out of it, and doesn't let people export out of it, or doesn't let people copy the entire system. But then what you get into is they're paying $300 extra a month on top of Airtable, and they're already paying $20 a month potentially if they go with the Pro plan for all their users already. And this is what ends up happening with Airtable. They end up, because Airtable is so limited as a platform on its own, they end up spending these monthly fees for all these external services that end up plugging into Airtable. So I don't actually have any clients that are just using Airtable on their own. Many of them are using, all of them are using many of these external services, and I'll show you a couple of them. Any other questions before I move on?
Yeah, Scott, what is the back end to Airtable? Or like, is it based on some open source or a SQL, or is it proprietary?
It is proprietary. It's proprietary. I don't know what they use to build it. Probably, I actually don't know, advanced programming languages, but it's proprietary. I'm sure they're probably doing, it's probably a JavaScript. I don't know. Is that one of the most advanced languages? I actually don't know. I actually have no idea what the most advanced languages are, so don't ask me. However, Airtable as a platform is a proprietary platform, but they have incredible APIs that all these external services are linking into, which we'll talk about, and I'll show you in a little bit, because I'll actually give you a little demo of Airtable as well after the slideshow. And but here's the thing though, they are, they're sort of you would call them like a unicorn company. They're a Silicon Valley unicorn company. They've been here for 5 years. They've received multiple rounds of funding. They just received another $150 million worth of funding. Their Airtable services that they're providing to the world are, just running on Amazon AWS servers, just like a lot of these companies are. And yeah, they have a very, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's they're like all these other unicorn startup companies. Let's see what else. There's no advanced searching in Airtable. There's like very, very simple searching, not the sort of things you'll see in that you see in FileMaker. There's no field validations, you guys. Like, one of the most important things that we have, field validations, to like make sure that someone types in a valid value into a field. Doesn't exist. There's very limited colors, almost no text formatting at all. There's no fonts to choose from. You get the one Airtable font in your system. You can't have relationships more than one table away. Think about that. Like that. I mean, have we ever had maybe? Oh, I guess think back to the FileMaker 3.0 days, where you could only relate to one table. You couldn't nest tables on the relationship graph. And so if you want to have a relationship more than one table away, you actually have to recreate the fields from table to table to table to table to table and link them through one relationship here. Then you recreate the fields here and you link them through another relationship. Very, very basic.
I turned off the video.
Meals or later? So Scott, the
Oh, wait, I hear somebody.
the
Yes, Lynn.
actual money in the Airtable universe is, it's like when they sell you a printer, they make all their money on toner.
Well, that's very interesting. Airtable only makes their money on their monthly membership fee, on the monthly user fee. And here's the thing: with this is actually on my next slide, I think. It's free to use Airtable. It's free. They only lock off some of the more advanced features, and if you want those advanced features, then you have to pay $20 per user. And this is sort of a little bit of a catch with Airtable, is that you don't upgrade individual users, you upgrade your entire workspace. So let's say you have 10 users and you're on the free plan, and one of them now needs access to one of these advanced features. You have to upgrade everybody that has access to your database. So everyone's either on the pro plan or everybody's on the free plan. But the thing is, though, that's all they get. They just get the monthly fee. What really ends up happening is people spend the money on all these little external plugins, but those plugins don't come from Airtable. They come from this vast ecosystem. Well, it's small, but growing. This ecosystem of third-party people that have developed all these different products. And that's where the extra money, the extra expenses come in. But Airtable doesn't make the money from those things. So Airtable just makes the money on the low monthly fee.
What I don't
yes.
quite understand is that it sounds very interesting and certainly very simple, but where the hell do you make any money on this thing when people are next to paying nothing?
It's a great question. It's a great question. And one thing that I would like to point out about that is that the projects that I do with Airtable are much smaller than the projects that I do in FileMaker. So for example, like probably my largest Airtable project that I've ever done was probably only about 60 or 70 hours worth of work. And that was on the large end. And you know that with FileMaker, we'll be developing, systems, that are sometimes hundreds and hundreds, thousands of hours sometimes. And so, yeah, the projects are much, much, much smaller. But a lot of the money that comes from Airtable consulting and Airtable development comes from the extra time that it takes to integrate in all these external services. And that's where I spend a lot of my time, and that's where they end up spending a lot of their money on the consulting. Because Airtable's so limited, you end up reaching out to all these extra services, all these extra websites and platforms. Oh, I think I hear someone's music or something. If you guys can mute yourself, that would be awesome.
Can you charge FileMaker rates for your Airtable consulting?
Yes, I charge the exact same rates for FileMaker and Airtable consulting. My rates are across the board the same. And what's interesting, oh, go on, I'm sorry.
You charge by the hour, not by the project.
That is correct. I charge by the hour. And one thing I would like to mention, this is super, super important, is that just because Airtable is simple, it doesn't mean that it's super easy to program in. And what I mean by that is when something is so incredibly simple, like when you have a scooter, right? And you're scooting down the street and someone's like, okay, we want to have a bar and a restaurant and we want to have a coffee shop on the scooter. How the hell are you going to build a bar, a coffee shop, and a restaurant on a little tiny Lime scooter that you're pedaling with your foot through the street? And I'm like, well, I could really build a great coffee shop, restaurant, and bar for you if you guys switch to FileMaker. And they're like, no. Everyone loves Airtable. We're sticking with Airtable. So it becomes a real challenge. In many ways, you could almost argue that developing an Airtable is more challenging than FileMaker once they push beyond the limits. Because how do you do that? How would you do that? How would you build a coffee shop on a scooter? I'll show you how I do it when we get to the demo part. Any other questions so
Yeah,
far?
just a comment. I couldn't help but think while you were talking about it, about the innovator's dilemma, Clay Christensen's sort of famous book about disruption theory, and how disruption always comes from this very underpowered, puny little, newcomer that the incumbents look at and say, oh, that's a joke. Nobody should think about that seriously. And that sounds like exactly the relationship between FileMaker and Airtable, is that FileMaker has all these features and very powerful, and Airtable is this little sort of, underpowered thing, but obviously, it's disrupting that space, and that people are using, who probably traditionally would have used FileMaker, are now using Airtable instead. So I just wanted to comment on that.
I love that comment. Thank you so much for saying that. I totally agree with you, Jonathan, because I looked at Airtable as a joke myself. And I was like, what is going on here? And what was so funny, actually, this is part of the story that I actually didn't mention. When I came back from the Europe trip, I was dating a girl. I was super in love with her. She was not as in love with me. So we broke up. And she got a brand new job at a new company that was doing everything in Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. And we've all been there before. And I was telling her about FileMaker and all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And she actually, because I said, your company should use FileMaker. And then she said, but wait a second, what was that thing you used on your Europe trip though? That wasn't FileMaker. And I said, oh, yeah. I said, it's a joke. It can't run your organization. She goes, no, but it looked really cool. And so I showed it to her and she goes, yes, this is what we need. And her business now, this is multiple years later, her company is now running fully on Airtable. It's like, I thought it was a joke. To her, it was a revolution. To her company, it was a revolution. And
Hey,
here
Scott.
I am.
Hey, Scott, how big of a company is that, just for context?
Oh, her company. They 25-ish employees, 25-ish, 30, 25, 30, somewhere in that range.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. So, any other comments or questions before I move on with this
I have a
slide?
question, Scott. So just going to Airtable's website, and I might be missing it, but I don't even see that they have a partner program. So I'd be interested to know how you're getting, unless I'm missing it, how you're getting business / referrals. Is it just SEO?
Right.
And when you're ready to talk about that.
Yeah, that they do not have a partner program. This is actually one of the things on this slide, which I'll get to. I think it's the final bullet point on this slide, which is that they don't have developer outreach. They don't have a lot of good community outreach. They don't have a good partner program. They almost look the other way on their developers. And so those two things I mentioned earlier about that developers conference where I went to, that was a developer created developers conference. It was not an official Airtable conference. That's how much the developers love that platform. They created a conference on their own, and there were 75 developers who showed up. It was the first ever Airtable developer conference. 75 developers showed up, and 80% of them were female, and almost everybody was in their late 20s. There was only 2 people in their 40s. And we were the 2 oldest people, me and this other guy. We were the oldest people. But that is the problem. Airtable doesn't have a partner program. They don't have a developer program. They don't have any conferences. One of the things about Airtable is they do have an enterprise plan. This enterprise plan is such a terrible deal compared to FileMaker. It's $3,000 a month for the enterprise plan, and you're limited to 100,000 records in your entire database across all tables. This is what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about like a scooter on the street, we're talking a scooter on the street. And you're not going to believe how many of my clients are paying the $3,000 a month to be on this enterprise plan. And I have told them time and time again, you guys only have 10 people in your organization. This would be so much cheaper in FileMaker. Now, yeah, it would take a little time to rebuild this in FileMaker, but you guys would save so much money per month. They're like, no, we love Airtable. Everyone loves Airtable. It's a passion. It is a Mac. go back to the 80s and the 90s when there were those passionate Mac users, and they won't leave. They will not leave. But the reason I brought up the $3,000 a month plan is the only real outreach that Airtable seems to really focus on is if you're a company that is paying them $3,000 a month, they ask you what you want in the product. They don't ask the developers what we need in our product. They don't ask us what our clients want, but they'll reach out one-on-one to these enterprise clients. So they're sort of, adding in these weird features from time to time. And you're like, why did you guys build in that feature? Because it makes no sense. And then you realize, oh, they had an enterprise client that asked for that feature, because it doesn't apply to anyone on the planet except for, like, just as an example, they released this crazy feature. No one would use this, where it's a meeting topic timer. So when you're having a meeting with someone, with a group of people, the timer clock will tick down, and it will show you what the next meeting topic is going to be and how many seconds you have left until the next until the meeting is supposed to move on to the next topic. I don't know, maybe people request that. I've never had a client, ever request that ever. And they rolled it out as this brand new feature. It's the meeting topic timer app. And there was a lot of complaints about that in the forums. And people figured out that, oh, one of their enterprise clients requested that. And that's why it's now a feature in Airtable. So yeah, so how do I get
that for FMDiSC?
There you go. There you go. Exactly.
Scott?
Yeah. Yes, Lynn.
I remember back in the FileMaker 2.1 days before it was relational, we could do some really extraordinary things, even with those basic features and all the limitations of it. And then, the development of FileMaker to its present day, a lot of it is developer driven. Some of it is client driven. Do you see Airtable going the same way, or are they going to try to keep it really basic, other than the occasional weird request from an enterprise client?
It's a great question, because up until about February of this year, I was like, I can't believe it. They're not making this product advanced at all. And then all of a sudden, starting in February, they started rolling out some really advanced power. They started rolling out full JavaScript support. They started rolling out the ability to create custom mini apps within the app. They started rolling out automations for the first time, like scripting. And I'm talking, we're at FileMaker 2.1 level scripting, but that wasn't even there in January of 2020. That one actually didn't even come till the summer. That didn't come till June of 2020 or something like that. And they have started rolling out these new advanced features. And there's been some rumblings in the forums about that they're starting to think about having a developers program. And there's some talk about having an official annual conference. So what's happening is, I think what we're seeing is it's about to transition into the FileMaker 3.0 days. And then potentially, maybe in a couple of years, it'll transition maybe into the FileMaker 7 days. So things were not happening for a while, and now it seems like things are happening. And so it seems like they're just going very slow and steady. And they might someday, who knows, maybe they'll be able to compete against FileMaker someday, like in terms of feature parity. I don't know. As far as, somebody else asked about where I'm getting my money, where I'm getting all the referrals from. A lot of it's coming through just native Google searches for my website. Most of it happened when I just added one page to my website offering Airtable development. I was almost doing it on a whim just to see if there was any demand out there. And so just from me adding this one page to my website, I started getting flooded with inquiries. And I'm also the #1 contributor in the forums online. And I often will sell my services online as well in the forums. I'll say, hey, if you need more advanced help, just contact me through my website. So I just get references just from the referrals, just from those two sources, just from Google and the community forums. And that's it.
So you're the Wim Decorte of Airtable.
Thank you. That's very sweet. That's quite a compliment. There's very few people on the planet who are as knowledgeable as Wim Decorte, but maybe I'll take that title. I don't know. Massive limits on records is another problem with Airtable. Think about this craziness, you guys. If you're on their paid plan, the $20 per month plan, you can't have more than 50,000 records maximum across all tables, So you're not going to believe this. You guys, I'm working with clients that have hundreds of thousands of records and they're using Airtable. How do we do it? I have an automation running for them where every month it archives their old records into another Airtable base. So the record limitations are per database. So they've got all these archived databases month after month after month. This is all because they don't want to leave Airtable. I even tell them, I said, you guys, FileMaker has no limits. Every day I have FileMaker conversations with my Airtable clients and they don't want to hear it. And I'm like, you guys, FileMaker, you can have millions of records. All your bases can talk to each other. There's no limits to anything. You can all stay under one roof. You can cancel all these extra monthly bills you're paying. And they're like, nope, the staff loves Airtable. Massive limits on container fields. Here's more craziness. Every database can only have a grand total of 20 gigabytes of files embedded in it. They call them attachments. We call it containers. They call it attachments. 20 gigabytes total for the whole database. So we end up having people use external solutions like Dropbox or Google Drive or Box.com. And then we have Airtable communicating back and forth between Airtable and Dropbox, Airtable and Google Drive. It's a lot of the success of Airtable comes from the fact that their API is so powerful that you can have all these external services that everyone's already used to using connect with Airtable. It's the Claris Connect approach. You know, it's Airtable started from the ground up with the ability to connect to all these other apps on the planet because Airtable works with Zapier and it works with Integromat, which is even more powerful than Zapier. So that's how we get around these limits on container fields. They've got their files somewhere else and we just link to them in Airtable. I talked about this a little bit earlier. It has limited scripting capabilities. Think about FileMaker 2.1. If you look at old screenshots of FileMaker 2.1, how basic it was for scripting, that's pretty much what we've got in Airtable. Limited email capabilities. It's hard to explain this one. They just started recently rolling out some minimal email capabilities within the product, but most of the email capabilities that you would do in Airtable would be through a third party like SendGrid, if you guys are familiar with SendGrid. So Airtable would send your information out to SendGrid and you could send it from there. But they do have a miniature SendGrid integration built into the app. And they just actually built in another miniature email capability. It's not what you're used to in FileMaker, but people love it. And, you know, who am I to talk people out of what they love? Because I'm starting to love it now too. It's providing me with the best financial year of my life. And I love it. And I love Airtable because it's, in a way, it's so exciting that I have to learn all these other external tools and all these external products. And to me, it's sort of like this fun little challenge every day to see how I can tie in all these extra plugins and all these extra integrations. So in a way, my world is super colorful because I'm always learning these new things on a daily basis for my clients. Oh my God, the limited calculations in Airtable. They have like 40 functions and they're so limited and so weak that you often have to turn to JavaScript to get the functions that you need. Then again, we have limited calculations at one point in FileMaker. Very limited access to summary fields. This one's a real tricky one in Airtable to try to pull information from groups of data. Very, very difficult in Airtable. Here's a big one. There's no automatic linking of relationships based on field values. It doesn't exist in Airtable, which makes no sense. In Airtable, there's no concept of primary and foreign keys. You actually have to manually link records to each other. The primary and foreign keys actually exist in the background. They just don't reveal it to the user. They have a very weak mobile app. The mobile app only has like maybe 75% or something like that of the features of FileMaker. I mean, a FileMaker. It only has a subset of the features of Airtable. That's what I meant to say. Here we go. Weak customer support and community engagement. The tech support knows, in many cases, less about the product than the people in the forums do.
Sorry, sorry to interrupt. The mobile app. Now, what are you saying, that it's got its own mobile app that lets you run a base in that app? Are you saying that you're deploying
Yes.
to a website?
That is correct. Airtable, yes, it is their own mobile app, and any bases that you've created show up in that app.
In that
basically.
app, okay. So it is
Exactly.
like a true app. Okay.
It's like a true app, exactly. And so you're using the official Airtable app. And yeah, and then you have all your bases, and you could separate them out by workspace. So different people can have access to some bases, but not other bases.
Hey Scott, is the mobile app, is that a native app that you can run without an internet connection, or is it a web app that needs a live connection?
It is a native iOS app and a native Android app, but it does require an internet connection. So if you have no internet access, you don't have access to your data. So in a way, I would sort of think of it like pretty much any other app that you might be accessing. I don't know what a good analogy would be. Like maybe if you're accessing your banking site, you know, you actually need to have an internet connection to see what your balance is.
Okay, so you can't do inspections in the basement when your internet connectivity does not work. Like a FileMaker Go, one of the compelling advantages.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Yeah, absolutely right. Again, that's at 1 to 100 ratio, right? FileMaker has 99 features for every one feature that Airtable has. And so yes, you're 100% right. If you are in the basement doing inventory and you have no internet connection, you can't use your Airtable system. You've got to come up with some other way to do it. It all comes back to that. Yeah, you use FileMaker Go. Exactly. You use that 1 to 100 ratio. By the way, I had a client that had that problem, an Airtable client. They had that problem. They had their people going out, scanning products, and they're like, oh, in our warehouse, we don't have good cell reception. And I was like, oh, well, we could do that with FileMaker Go. They're like, no, we're going to figure out something else. And they installed some sort of Wi-Fi cell tower inside their warehouse to deal with the limitations of Airtable. So this is sort of the upside down world that I've entered, which I didn't know existed, where people are changing their workflows, they're changing their lives, they're changing their business operations just so they can stay with Airtable. And to FileMaker developers, this sounds like crazy talk, because it's like, why would you change everything about the way you do everything just because you love Airtable? But it's because they love Airtable. So here's my question. If you have to ask it, can Airtable do insert FileMaker feature? The answer is no. You should just know that right off the bat. The answer is no, we can't do it. We could do it with a lot of workarounds. But for the most part, it can't do it. Why do people love Airtable? It turns out it's the same 6 reasons that got me on it when I went on that European trip. It's free. And if you want some of the advanced features, then it only is $20 a month per user. It's cloud-based, no setup. It synchronizes across all your devices. And like Tony said, as long as you have an internet connection. And when I say synchronize, it's not really a synchronization. It's you're accessing your system live. It's a live connection. So I was using the word synchronize loosely there, just so you guys know. It's quick, it's easy, and it's fun. Same reasons I got into it. But why do people really love Airtable, right? Those are the 6 reasons they'll tell you they love Airtable. But why do I think they really love Airtable? Oops. Because it empowers them. It's like the old FileMaker 2.1 days. They can log into Airtable, have a system in 3 minutes or less, and they look like a god to their boss. Oh, can you guys mute your your screens, please? Thank you so much. They suddenly have solved a problem for their organization, and they did it on their own. They did it on their own. And so it's like the old FileMaker 2.1 days with some modern necessities thrown in. This is where the real thing is. When I meet people that come to me for Airtable work, they've already created their systems in Airtable. And they're so proud of themselves. And I'm proud of them because they created a system that their whole team is using now. It was like back in the old days when FileMaker was so simple that they popped in the disk and they installed it off a floppy disk, and 5 minutes later, they had their first FileMaker database. That's the Airtable days now. So some of the necessities they've thrown in for today: easy and intuitive interface. There's built-in forms, built-in calendars, built-in Kanban views, built-in photo galleries. And by the way, each one of these things is one click of a mouse button. There's shareable and embeddable everything. You create a photo gallery, instantly it's a website that people can access. You can embed it in your existing website or make it on an Airtable URL, all part of the monthly cost. Everything is shareable, everything is embeddable on the web, and it's all built in, and it's one click of a button. There's built-in revision history and commenting. There's built-in chat in Airtable where people can comment on records. We've been trying for years, right, to come up with the perfect audit log for FileMaker. Every single thing is tracked in Airtable with timestamps, date stamps, who made the change, what the change used to be, what the new change is. So there are some things that Airtable does that are still not built into FileMaker, which is amazing. They've got full JavaScript support now, just like FileMaker just introduced this year. They have an excellent API so the whole world can reach into it. There's a whole ecosystem of integrations and external automations. They have thousands of built-in templates that you can start off with. And there's a whole thing called the Airtable universe which is templates are official Airtable templates, and the Airtable universe is templates that the community has created of templates. And they have a marketplace of apps and custom apps. These are free. Most of these are free, including one of my favorites, a dedupe app. How many times have we tried to create deduplication things in FileMaker? They've got the most powerful deduplication app. It's free, comes with Airtable. It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. So what they're doing is they've created this very basic core product that does almost nothing. But then they've created this, they call it a marketplace, but they're all free. They've created all these free apps that you can use with Airtable, and that's how they extend onto Airtable. The custom apps are people like me and you developing it, and you can charge for your custom apps. And that's brand new. They just released that like a month ago, so there's no paid apps yet. So we'll see how that develops over time. Oops. So now I'd like to show you the demo. Jonathan, how much time do I have left? I didn't pay attention when I started.
Scott, we're flexible on the timing since it's not like we have to be out of the room at a specific time. So what do you think for the demo? 10, 15 minutes? Or do you think?
Yeah, maybe 10, 15 minutes. Would that work for you guys?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I mean, normally we end at 1, so it's 12:35. So that's 25 minutes from now. We'll probably have some questions.
Great. Yeah. So let me just do a quick sort of demo of what the interface looks like and what you can do with it. So they do have a desktop app, but the desktop app is identical to the web app. So if you're on your desktop, you would go into it from your web browser typically. And then if you're on your phone or your iPad, you would just do it through their mobile app. And so basically this is what their home screen looks like. So all the different projects that you've been working on, every single one of these is a different database, and you can see that they can be separated out into different groups. These are workspaces. And so you can just, this is how you can organize things, just like this. And all your bases are right here. This is essentially your home screen. And here's a demo system here for a hotel conference. And so you go in here, and this is what the interface looks like. And what you see is what you get. Everything that you can do in Airtable is right here on this screen. Here's your buttons right here. And there are some buttons that are hidden. There are some screens that are hidden. The automations panel opens up here on the right. This is like where you can script things. Their apps panel is over here. This is where you can browse their app store. So you can click on install an app here. And these are all the free apps. They've got something like 50, maybe 60, I forgot. 50 or 60 apps that you can install to add extra functionality into your system. And so, for example, let's say that you want to create a system that sends text messages to people. Well, there is an SMS app in here. There we go. Send SMS. It's not from Airtable, of course. It goes through Twilio. I mean, Airtable created this app, but it uses Twilio. In essence, Airtable has sort of outsourced a lot of these extra functionalities. So you click on install here, and now this little app shows up. Just takes a few seconds here to install this app. And here you go. Now you have SMS functionality in your system. You click on get started here, and you type in your Twilio account SID, your Twilio authorization token, and what phone number they give you. And then you can start linking your records to start sending SMS messages. So that one, I actually didn't set that up ahead of time, so I can't actually show you that in person right now. But that's how you essentially add in different functionality into your system. They've got stuff that links to all sorts of different websites and all sorts of cool things that are in here, like graphing and charts and stuff like that. And that's all part of this apps panel here. And here's the other cool thing. If they don't have an app that meets your needs, because there's only 60 apps to choose from or something like that, I actually don't remember what the number is. That's where you can integrate Airtable with other products like Integromat. Oops. Oh, you know what? I can't see it because the Zoom thing's in my way, but let me just see here. So I think you guys know about Zapier. There's also another automation platform called Integromat. And this is what Integromat looks like here. Oh, wait, let me just log out here for a second. So this is Integromat, and that's just like Zapier, and it's just like Claris Connect. And this is how you can connect Airtable, with the whole world of services. So think about Claris Connect. That's what makes Airtable so successful, is that it's open to the entire world. So this is what the interface looks like. And what you can see here is we've got some sub-summaries going on here. They call it grouping. So this, for example, is a schedule of events that I've created for an upcoming conference, and I've grouped them by the category of the event. So if I click on here, what I can do is I can ungroup them, and now they're probably in creation order. I actually don't know what order they're in. Oh, here we go. I actually check right here. You click on sorted by one field. This is where you sort. They're actually sorted by start time. And so you could layer on your sorts here. So let's say I want to sort it by category, and I want to move category on top of start time here. So now my events for this conference that's coming up, they're sorted by category. As you can see, it's this column right here. And then it's sorted by time within each category. And then I can group the events here as well if I wanted to. So this is actually how it started. It was started by category when we first went into it. So it automatically breaks this up into sub-summaries here, what they call groups. And for your summary fields, you have these little pop-up menus here where you can summarize the values within that group. So for example, this is a text field here. So it doesn't give me any choice of any numbered things, but what it could say is how many unique values do I have out of these 6? So in this group, for example, there's 6 values in this group. There's a count of 6, and there's 6 unique values. In a little bit, I'll show you how you can do summaries with numerical fields. You can color things, quote unquote, you can color things, but not really. You can choose colors for things, but they only just put a little swab of color over here in the left margin. You can't really color the fields. They use field colorings for other things, such as sorting. So if you sort by a field, those fields turn orange. You can see there is some color here. This is a value list. So this is, you can color your values, and that's one of the pro features, which is very interesting. They don't give you colors unless you pay for the $20 a month. It turns out people love colors, and they will pay. This is the difference between the free plan and the pro plan is very, very minor. It's like whether you want no colors or colors. And people are like, oh, hell yeah, we're paying $20 a month for the colors. It's like, you could have had this for free, but they want the colors. So very limited space to even see the information in these fields. You can see that it closes up the full information here. To see the full information there, you actually have to click on these little blue arrows here to expand it to see the whole thing. The row heights, you click on this and you have 4 row heights: short, medium, tall, and extra tall. And that's it. That's as tall as your grid's getting. It's never getting taller than that. This is how simple this is. But check this out. I also have a table of speakers here. And these are people that are going to be speaking at my conference. And you could see that I've got some photos here. And what you could do is you could zoom in here and, oh, actually, this is only one photo, but let's go in here. You could zoom in here and you could see these are all the photos. You could have PDF files in here, whatever you want. You could move them around like this. Let's say that I want to add some new photos in here. You could just drag and drop your photos in. So let me see, I think I have, yep, I put it here. So let's say I have like another photo here. I'll just take it from my desktop. Oops. Oh, you know what? I'm blocking my own screen here. So I'll just take a photo here. I'll drag it in here and that's it. You can see it's processing the photo. This little thing is spinning here. And in a second, that photo will show up. So they have different field types. The field types are very basic. This is, and there we go. There's the photo that I just uploaded. So they have different field types. They're very, very basic. They have, each one is basic, I mean, but they actually have more field types than in FileMaker because they're each broken up. So they have a single line text field, a long text field, attachment, that's their container field. They have checkbox fields. This right here is a checkbox field. So we're keeping track of whether we've given gifts to the speakers when they show up at the event. And I have a little thumbs up there. You can actually customize these fields. There's a lot of fun and whimsical stuff that's happening in Airtable. So you could change this to like green stars if you want. And so now it's green stars, or it could be just a little blue check mark.
Does anyone have that access, or is it because you're like an administrator or developer level that you have the ability to add a field like that?
Right, there's different levels of access. And again, very, very minimal levels of access compared to FileMaker. There's essentially 3 levels of access. There's creators, and those people can go in and customize these things. There's editors. Those people can't customize the fields, but they can edit data. And then there's read-only access. So when I say simple, it is simple. But to Lynn's point from earlier, surprise, surprise, earlier in this year, they started rolling out some more advanced features where if you have someone that's an editor, now for the first time, you know, as of like 5 or 6 months ago, you can now edit field permissions. So now on a field by field level, you can specify this person can do this person can edit, this person can view. So it's one of those things. It goes back to Jonathan, what he was saying about how these revolutions come from these things that people laugh off at first, right? Me personally, I was laughing off. I'm like, there's no way this is ever going to take off. You can't give somebody edit access to the entire system. And turns out, yes, I was right. And yes, they knew that, and it came later. You know, they're 5 years into this product and it just came, but they knew that. So it's building up slowly. It's like this stealth thing that's happening. They're adding in the advanced features bit by bit by bit by bit. Here's a rating field. Look how fun this is. You could rate how much you love a speaker, right? With these little hearts. Like, look at this. All you have to do is add the rating field and you instantly get this. And it doesn't even need to be hearts. You can just go in here and customize it, and you can make it, you know, a flag, a thumbs up, a yellow star. Let's do gold stars. How high do you want your rating scale to go from 1 through 10? And let's make this a 9-point rating scale. And you just go here and you just click on however you want to rate these people. So really, really fun and fluid, and it's so easy to create a new field. You just right click here and you say insert a new field to the right. And you say, okay, I want a checkbox field here. You make it a checkbox, and I'll just choose just a green, let's just do a blue check mark, click save. And there you go. Now you have a checkbox field right here. You can create formulas. Like I said earlier, the formulas are very, very limited, but this is where it starts getting really cool. You can create different views for your data. So let's go back to our schedule of events here. And we have this whole schedule of events here. And let's say that we want to create a calendar view of this. Well, I've already created some calendars here, but I want to show you how easy it is to do it from scratch. So this is a list of your layouts. This is the equivalent of layouts in Airtable. They're called views. And I want to create a new calendar view. I just click on this plus button here, and it says, okay, cool. What field do you want to use for as your date field? And I'll say start time, and I want to end on the end time. Those are just 2 time fields in my system. I just created 2 time fields, start time and end time, and I click done, and that's it. Now I have a calendar. Now this happens to be an event that's all taking place on one day. So let's go into the day view here, and here we go. Now we have all the events in a day view, and you can see you have a month view, you have a 2-week view, a week view, all these different views. And it's right here. That took me 1.5 seconds to create a calendar. And then you can color your calendar. You can say, okay, let's make sure that our events are the same color as the category color that we chose originally. You can also do custom colors as well. Oh, actually, you can't do custom colors on this screen. You can only do custom colors on other screens. On a calendar, you have to choose what field do you want it to match to. So now I'm matching them to what room these events are taking place in. So for example, I could go back here. Oh, and by the way, check this out. If you double click on one of these, it gives you the main information, and then you can expand it even further, and it shows you everything about that record. If we go back to our grid view from earlier here, this is where we were at the beginning. This is all of our events grouped by category. You can click in any one of these things here, and you can either hit the space bar or just hit on these click these arrows here, and it zooms you into that full record like this. And by the way, over here is that activity that I was talking about that FileMaker doesn't have built in. So let's say that I was to change this from this category to a different category. Now, if I zoom into this record, check this out. It shows that I edited this record now, and it was education, and now it's entertainment. It keeps track of everything. And you could even have comments in here. You could say, hey, you could tag people in here. So I don't have anybody else on this, but if I had someone, I could say, hey, Jeff, check out the changes I made to this record. And then he gets alerted through email and within Airtable, and we can have a conversation right here. So they've got chatting and activity logs built in to the system. And check this out. You can also, so this is my calendar right here, but the searching is very, very limited. They have one of these apps you can install that has a more advanced search, but it's still nothing compared to what FileMaker Search is. You could filter these records. So let's say that I just want to show only the events where the category is education. There we go. Now my category is only showing my education events, and I don't want to filter them. I don't want to color them by the room they're in. I want to color them by the category. And now I know, because my education events are all blue, there we go. And I could rename this calendar. I can call this my education events calendar. And now check this out. I could share this view as a shareable calendar view link to the whole world. So what I can do is they give me an airtable.com link here for this calendar. And let's open this up in a new tab in my browser here. And now this is open to the entire world. I now have a website link. No programming on my end. The whole world, this is an accessible URL to the whole world now, and they can see my calendar. And if I had all my events here, all the filtering and sorting capabilities are right here within the calendar. So people can filter it. Now this is already filtered down to just education, so there's really nowhere else to filter from here. But if I went back into Airtable and I had all my calendars here, right? This is live, right? So as I change my filter here, that actually changes what people see from this link. So that could be a little bit tricky, right? Like you don't want your employees changing a view that the whole world is seeing. So they have these you can lock your views too. So your other users can't change the view. I mean, can't change what you've set up. You can lock the views. So now when we go back to that calendar, I don't know what tab that was on. So let me just regenerate a new tab here. You'll notice that it is now showing me everything because I changed the view in Airtable. So it's live. So if I was a user saying, oh, I'm coming to this conference, I want to filter this to show me just the education events, I could go in here and say, show me just the education events, and boom, now I've got my own filtered calendar here. You can do a similar thing with their web galleries as well. So let's go back into my speakers table here. These are all the people that are going to be speaking in my event. I can create a photo gallery just with one click of a button. I can click on this gallery right here and boom, now I have a brand new view of my speakers. And if somebody has more than one photo, check this out. You just roll your mouse over this and it shows you all the photos for this person. And if you click on this person, it zooms you in and shows you all the data for that person. And just like the calendar sharing, if I click on the share view here, I can create a shareable gallery view link. And here it is. Here's the public link. I preview this in another tab. And now the whole world that's coming to my conference can see who's speaking at this event. They can even click on this person's name here and it zooms in right here to show them all the information about this person. You can also embed this within your own website. It gives you the JavaScript code right here. You click on this and it says, okay, choose the options that you want, blah, blah. For this, there's only one option at the top. Sometimes there's a couple options to choose from. And it says, okay, this is what it's going to look like on mobile. This is what it's going to look like on desktop. Here's the JavaScript code. Copy and paste this into your website and you're set. It gets even better. This is one thing that almost all of my clients are using is forms. Let's say you want speakers to fill in their own information so they can access your database. You click on form and now you have a new layout, a new view called form. So now we're setting up a form from scratch. Check this out. Thank you for speaking at our event. And you can, oops, thank you for speaking at our event. Please give us your info below. And you can add a logo here if you want. You know, you can, let me go to my desktop here. I have a nice little logo that I can use. Uh-oh, I'm getting a spinning beach ball. Okay, good, here we go. Let's go in here. So let's choose a little logo here. Because this is a conference that's taking place at the Landon Hotel. That's why I have that logo. You can add a cover image up at the top of your form. So let's choose this cover image that I have here. And then, so I'm building my form here and I'm saying, yes, we want people to fill out their name, title. It automatically took all the fields that were in my system and it put all the fields here. But here we don't need the gift given, so we'll just drag it off to the side. This is where you hide the fields off to the right. We don't want speakers to rate themselves. We don't need the checkbox field, and we don't want to link them to events. And everything else here looks good. So that's it. The form is done. I just created a web form in like what, a minute? And now you can share this on the web. You could restrict access to the password. There's lots of other options here I haven't shown yet. Let's preview this form. This form is now live at this link. So check this out. I'm going to type in Jonathan Reff here. We're going to say he's the president of the world. And here's Jonathan's biography. Hi there. I'm Jonathan. And I will be talking about cupcakes and brownies, my two favorite desserts. Okay. Look at this. You can format this a little bit if you want. You could have bold, italics, whatever. And then Jonathan can upload his photo right here through the form. I actually don't have a photo of Jonathan. So Jonathan, you're going to be Victor Gonzalez today.
One of my many aliases.
Yeah, exactly. I knew it. I'm sorry that I destroyed your secret. And then you click submit, and that's it. Now, if we go back into our Airtable database and we go back to our grid view, if we scroll down to the bottom, the newest record is there. And you can see I already did Victor Gonzalez earlier, and he also likes cupcakes. But here we go. Jonathan Ref, president, the world. Here's all the information we just typed in. And let's say Jonathan is going to be speaking at some events. This is where you link tables to each other. You create these fields that are called linked record tables, or I'm sorry, linked record fields. And in this field, you click in here and you get a little plus sign. And I could say, okay, which events is Jonathan going to speak at? Previously, before the demo today, I already set this up. So you know what? Let me just show you how easy this is to set up. I'm going to create a new field. I'll insert right. I'm going to call this, I'll just call this events. And I'm going to link it to another record. Which table do you want to link to? I'm going to link it to my schedule of events. And I'm going to click save. And here we go. I click in here. Oh, wait, let's go back down to Jonathan. Here's Jonathan's record down here. I click in here. I click the plus sign. And I say, oh, okay, Jonathan's going to be speaking at this event. He's going to be speaking at this event. And that's it. So now we now have related two tables to one another. And I didn't have to create any interface at all. And if you're curious about this, you're like, oh, Jonathan's going to be speaking at the making things, or he's going to be speaking at this one, 3D printing with clay. You're like, well, what is that event all about? You just click on this right here, the little blue link here, and it zooms you into that record right there. This is the equivalent of going to a related record, but it's doing it right here from this table. And it even does this cool little thing. It has this little squiggly white line here to let you know that it's pulling this information from your schedule of events table. So right here, I linked Jonathan to an event in another table. I clicked on the blue link here, and boom, this is all the information that I need to know without me having to jump into that other table. And then if I do jump into that other table, the schedule of events table, and let's just create a new grid view from scratch here. You'll notice that these are all my different events. And let's look for that 3D printing one. Here it is. And I'm going to, oh, actually, I actually have 3D printing multiple times in here because it's happening many, many times throughout the conference. So I'm just going to sort these fields by session title. And now I should have my 3D printing with clay up here at the top. And we will see a field. This is the old one. This is the one that happened before the demo. So I'm just going to delete that field. This is the new one that we created over here just now. It already created the reverse link back. So when I jump into this field and I go into 3D printing with clay, oh, I only have one 3D printing with clay. I must have deleted the duplicates earlier. It shows me that the speaker here is Jonathan. It called this speakers 2 because I already had a speakers field in here, but I'm just going to rename this and I'll just call it, these are speakers for this event. So now I'm in this other table. And here's Jonathan, and I can click on his name, and now it zooms me into his record right from here. And so I've really gone over the time now, but there's other cool things as well, like there's a Kanban view, so you can see, you can organize these things. So this is now separated by room for these different events. So what I could do is I could just move an event from one column to another, which essentially means I'm moving this event from the central ballroom into another room. So this is all built in, and it's just as easy as the other stuff. You just go down here, you say, give me a new Kanban. And you say, okay, what do you want to sort by, category or room? Because those are the only fields that have value lists in them. It only lets you do that if you have value list fields. So if I had more value list fields, they would show up. And I'd be like, you know what? Let's sort them by category instead of room. And there we go. Now I have my education events, my entertainment events. And I'm like, oh, you know what? This is really an education event. I just move it over there. And you can customize these cards as well. You can add the speaker's photos to that event. You could add the bio, you could add the category, whatever you want. And you can customize these cards. And you could zoom in to see more. And again, everything is shareable and everything is embeddable on a website. So there we go. Now it's 1 o'clock. Now I've really gone over. Sorry about that.
Okay, Scott, we know you have to have tried this. Have you connected it to FileMaker?
Wonderful question. Yes, I have. So using FileMaker's ability to insert from URL, you can write up your own code. So for example, I have just a little sample database here that I created. I was going to show you all 6 of these records, but clearly I talk way too much and I wasn't able to show you even half of the demo. But here's a good example of where I've created in FileMaker posting a single record to a table. So this is actually going back into my travel itinerary. This is my very first database when I went to Europe, my travel itinerary. And I have a general notes tab. I actually cleared out all my notes specifically just for this demo. And so now let's go back into FileMaker. And so this is what I set up here. Oh, actually, this is a calculation field right here. So this field I can't edit, but this is where I typed up the information right here. And I'm just going to send data, running this script from here into Airtable. Oh, and it says could not parse request body. Oh, damn. You know what? I changed something. Oh, you know what? I didn't test this one before the demo. I apologize. I changed something in my Airtable system, and I actually don't know if any of these are going to work now. Let me try a different one here. I actually changed the name of something in Airtable. Oh, okay, so I may not even be able to actually show you this working right now, but
we get the point. It's just another.
But you get the point. It's just another API. Yeah, I actually did have that working. Damn, see, the demo gods did strike me. But yes, it works. And I'm embarrassed that I didn't do a final check before I actually did the demo. But yeah, in essence, it's very easy. I've sent, hundreds of records to Airtable, back to FileMaker, etc.
That's great.
Scott,
thank you so much, Scott. That was a whirlwind. That was like your European tour. I feel like we've covered 4 months in an hour, but we hit.
I apologize.
We hit all the major sites, all the tourist attractions.
But I have one really important question.
Yes, Bob.
How does a one-man shop with 200 clients take a 4-month vacation?
That's a great question. It was really a lot of me waking up in the hotel room in the morning, doing like 3 or 4 hours of work, and then going out and exploring the rest of the day. But no, but the real answer actually is I did do a couple hours of work every day on my vacation. But the real answer is that, when you have 200 clients, they're not all active at any given time.
Still, I'm jealous.
Scott, what does FileMaker need to do to try and duplicate some of the success of Airtable? What does Claris need to do, I should say?
Well, it's a good question. You could almost argue that FileMaker has achieved Airtable and beyond, right? Because you can do anything in the world with FileMaker. I don't know if they're targeting the same audience anymore. That's the thing. I think FileMaker now might actually be targeting more large organizations, more enterprise level, people that need more security, that need fine-tuned custom interfaces. Because once again, remember, what you see here is what you get. I showed you all the interfaces. You're not going to get a custom invoice screen in here. If you do an invoice in Airtable, for example, you've got to link your line items through one of those little fields. Your line items come up in one of those linked record fields. You can't even get like an invoice view. So I don't necessarily think that FileMaker wants to be Airtable, but I would say that Airtable is hitting that low end of user, the small business now. They're hitting the small teams, the solopreneurs, and I think eventually they will be adding in custom layouts. Because I actually was talking to a product manager at Airtable, and he said it's on their radar to start letting people create custom layouts. So I actually don't have an answer to that question, I guess, except that I don't know if FileMaker could attract the same crowd, because this is, I don't know, this is sort of like that lure. They're luring people in with the ease of use. They're luring people in with the quick interface and all that. And I don't think FileMaker is in that realm anymore. I know they have the templates and stuff now, but I feel like FileMaker feels more daunting to people now, I think, in a way. I don't know. That's just from my own experience dealing with my clients. I don't know.
maybe a related question then.
Hold on.
As FileMaker developers, what can we do to design solutions that scratch some of those same itches? And what would your top 2 or 3 suggestions be for that?
That you mean sort of make things a little bit easier for the users, that sort of thing?
Not just what can Claris do or should Claris do if they're trying to go after that same market, but if we're given the fact that we are FileMaker developers, are there things we can learn from the, I mean, it sounded like there were rabid, fanatical Airtable users. How can we design things so that the users of our products are like that?
Right. I think that FileMaker has addressed that actually with FileMaker 19 with the add-ons. I think that's sort of, it's, we would have to create that for our users, but I think the fact that FileMaker 19 has these new JavaScript add-ons, we now for the first time have these beautiful drag and drop calendar capabilities and Kanban capabilities. So I think if we take advantage of the new JavaScript capabilities and the new add-on capabilities of FileMaker, I think we can provide some of that fluidity that people love in Airtable. And I think that's what people love. It's that fluidity. Like you saw when I clicked on Jonathan Reff's name in my system, it automatically just opened up this elegant pop-up window that showed all of his information. And now, and I guess we got some of that with the cards in FileMaker. I think just taking advantage of those new features that Airtable is bringing in, like the card windows and the JavaScript add-ons.
Thank you.
Hey, Scott, I'm gonna officially end the meeting and stop the recording.
Great.
So thank you very much for that. But I'll leave the Zoom open if people want to, still to talk about Airtable or anything else for a few minutes.
I think we need to plan a